Good evening and welcome to Speakers Corner UK. I'm here with my, as always, co-host on the Gin and Tonic Show and seemingly co-host on Speakers Corner Review Critiques. Stop spamming. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Hi, good evening. I'm doing well. I've eaten well. I've done everything well. I'm very happy with myself. It's a brilliant day. It's just a little bit cold now. I actually had to put on a sweater today in the morning. Hate it. I love summer.
Yeah, same on this side here. We are certainly getting a little cooler now. With that said, it's already getting a bit late and we've got potentially about an hour of a video. Well, there's over 3 hours here. We're going to try and do the first hour before I come on. So what we have here is this is Answering Atheists live stream review. So this is a review of their stream. So it's a little bit like Inception. We're reviewing the EFDawah people who are reviewing a stream that Darren Hamza from Speakers Corner ran last Friday. So we'll do the first part here. There's about 6 Muslims on. 5 of them are going to chat. One of them is a host. And so they're going to talk amongst themselves in the first part of this. Then I do come on later on, but we won't get a chance to review that. It'll take us some time to review the first hour. So let's get started, I guess, straight away with this and them going straight into the review of their stream. So we're reviewing their review. Here we go.
Rob,
Go ahead.
why don't we go and restrict this? Okay, why don't we say, because I just said, okay, I'm going to keep quiet and only say what is really essential, because I'm always giving background information and reasoning for why this is. I'm going to skip that now, because now I'm taking the audience listening to this as informed audience who have the basics, who don't need to get the basics anymore. So I'll keep quiet and we just restrict it to 1 hour so actually people can go and listen to this and have a chance, instead of having these huge, gigantic 3-hour thingamajigs in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, let's just see how we get on, because I think at some points we can let it go, and especially, I guess, if we've critiqued it before and they repeat themselves, we can just sort of make note that we've covered that, and then hopefully we can keep it down. But I think at least some of the comments we're getting is people sort of enjoy it, and you can sort of put it on and listen to it when you're out and about or something. You know, if I'm mowing the lawn or doing some other task where I know I'm going to be busy for an hour, I just plug in headphones and I can listen to something. So yeah, let's see how we get on here, and we'll try and again focus on the arguments. We'll try and keep our critique of the people per se, but obviously if somebody is saying something silly, then and we can point it out. I don't think it's unreasonable to say, hey, you're saying something contradictory, that's a bit ridiculous, and here's the reason. I think just to say somebody's an idiot or somebody's X, Y, and Z without giving any reasons, I think is not helpful. But for the most part, we'll try and restrict it to the actual content of what's being said. Okay, with that said, here we go.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
How's it going, guys? We've got Yusuf today, mashallah. How you doing, bro? Welcome.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for having me.
Has everyone got their cup of tea ready for a lovely chat? Yeah.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
My piece is on its way.
Pizzas on the. Yeah. It's not the ration challenge. Oh, actually, it's not the ration challenge anymore. But alhamdulillah. So, guys, we're talking about the live stream that was on Hamza's Den yesterday. Is that correct? Yeah.
That's right.
Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. Right. Who wants to kick off a little summary of what happened?
Oh, okay. So basically, what happened yesterday, was it yesterday, Friday, a live stream, mashallah, on my other channel, Hamza's Den. And then what we did, we introduced some arguments that atheists present to theists when trying to speak about creator and such. And we've had a lot of atheists responding. I mean, there's been a lot of atheists in my chat, and I don't know what they're responding to. We've had reaction videos made about it. Again, indicating that apparently we don't know how atheists think. We've made them into one conglomerate. But what we were doing, we were presenting challenging arguments that we do get atheists come at us with. So yeah.
Okay, at this point, that's fine. I don't have a problem with anybody challenging any arguments they get. I think what what our initial, or at least my initial critique is, that you've got to steel man. You've got to really understand what the argument is and be charitable. I take it the strongest version you can, or understand it to the best of your ability and critique that. If you're going to straw man it, or you're not going to fully understand it, then it's going to look like it's easy for you to overcome. So I think that's my main critique, and especially in all of them, certainly with Hamza, you've got to really understand what the argument is, and ideally, if you can frame it correctly, then that helps understand it. And I think even his first, the one with evolution, for example, he didn't fully understand it. And when I challenged him on this exact stream, which we won't hear tonight, it was an assumption that he's making, and that's not a good way to start. So just understand it. Obviously, you're welcome to critique anything, and that's what all of us want.
My beef is that he's pretending like we have the arguments. No. I don't have the arguments. I take the claims, their arguments, and I react to them. If they don't make claims, if they don't propose or may bring forward any arguments, I'm keeping quiet. I don't go and challenge somebody just because they're there. I go and react to something that they are doing. It's not because they always pretend the atheists come to us with their arguments. No, we don't have any arguments. We just go and react to yours. That's the only thing.
Yeah, I think that's the majority of atheists do that. There might be some who actually go, hey, I've got an argument for naturalism or whatever the case is. But oftentimes it's a response to a theist claim. But either way, whichever, again, you've got to know, and he did actually say it in the previous stream, you've got to, not all atheists are the same. And I think that's fine. But then whichever atheist particular argument are going to critique, make sure that you understand it clearly.
The idea of proving your God, the suffering in the world, and evolution and things like that. So what I thought would be fantastic would be for us to analyze what went on. And we got a philosopher in the house, in Brother Yusuf, mashallah, to help us understand, because they were coming with so much philosophy. I mean, I've got a page full of flipping crazy atheist philosophers at the moment, asking me all sorts. So inshallah, this will break that down. So yeah, alhamdulillah, Abbas was dying to jump on the last stream. Unfortunately, I didn't see his message. Sorry, my brother. Jordan's going to give us his straightforward reactions. Obviously, Imran is going to give us his breakdown. And alhamdulillah, let's go.
I don't know about you, Stoffs. I just think that it's good evening to everybody who's just joining us. Thank you for joining the stream. I just think 6 people, or 5, because host Ben is not going to say much. I think 5 people is just too many. I think, ideally 3, more than 3, and it becomes very difficult. Not everybody gets a chance to do it. And if you can have 3 people that really understand the arguments and they're putting forward a critique, that's of interest to me, especially if it's people that really know it. I want to hear, because they're going to, say things now, because you don't always get a chance in the moment, in the live moment, to give your ultimately best response. You can always tweak it, improve, and I think that's what anybody could do. And I think it's not a bad thing to critique it. So I'm, listening now to see because I didn't actually remember seeing all of this whole thing when I went on. I probably listened to most of it, but I'm all good with it. I just think that the panel was too loaded in terms of being given everybody a chance. And I'm going to say it up front. I think Yusuf Ponders, of all of them, was certainly the most charitable, had the best understanding of everybody on here, at least when I listened and when I had a discussion. And even after I left, he tried to represent my argument. And that's very rare in my experience for Muslims. So I'm going to say at the outset, yeah, certainly, and this was the first time I've ever met or spoken to him, he was certainly the most charitable and certainly more knowledgeable than all of the rest of them, I think, at least when I was listening.
Yeah, I thought he had the most substance, yeah.
Go for it, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So,
Where do you want to begin?
Abbas and Jordan, you weren't there on the actual stream, but what did you think watching the stream? What was your kind of...
Can I mention one thing before, Abbas? You go first, but can I mention, because obviously we're talking about atheists. I mean, I think you made it clear at the start that you're not talking about the normal geezer in the street that maybe don't really care. You were talking about sort of this new atheist group. And I thought Tom, who came on, Tom Jump, the way he was defending Darwin and almost taking whatever he said, even though it was clearly pointed in front of him, that
Dawkins.
actually almost do it. Sorry, Dawkins. Yeah, sorry, Dawkins. Even though he was shown, various times on video, you saw him kind of do what they accuse theists of doing, defending our religion regardless. He was doing the same for Dawkins, which I thought was extraordinary. So I think that was proof to me that
again, obviously Jordan doesn't understand the argument, or at least didn't understand Tom's response. You and I have done it on the previous stream. We won't rehash it. Please go back and watch our previous video, the one before this, where we break down word for word what Dawkins said, and we give the response. And the short answer is we don't think Dawkins is being dishonest in the way that Sabur attempts to address it. And the fact that all of these guys, I don't know if we'll hear Yusuf, I don't remember if he responded to this, but the fact that Jordan thinks that Tom was being dishonest or wasn't accepting that it was sort of straightforwardly obvious that Dawkins was being dishonest just tells me that he's caught up in the bubble as well. And, it is what it is.
The funny thing is they're trying to put non-believers into the same corner as Christians now. Because I think it's easier for them to go and sort of mentally prepare or mentally handle this. Otherwise, I think they would go crazy. Because they simply, this is what I say all the time. There's no way that an atheist cannot put himself into the brain of a theist, but the other way around is totally impossible. It's not possible for a theist to put himself in the mindset of a non-theist, so this doesn't work.
Yeah, I do find that difficult. Theists find it very difficult to do it. I can do an internal critique of a person's worldview, take on their presuppositions, see whether it in fact is either reasonable or reliable, or in fact if there's any contradictions in there. But I do find the other way around, it's very rare. I can't think of somebody off the top of my head. There may well be somebody, but it's very rare that a theist can do the same thing, can steelman a particular atheist view and then, charitably understand their argument to the best of their ability and then critique it. That's very rare. I will agree with you on that.
We are actually talking about one set of people in that fact.
Okay.
One other quick thing I'll say here, if the critique is not of the atheists in the street who presumably Dawkins appeals more to because they'll just read the book and go, yeah, I agree with it. If they are actually responding to you, me, and others like Tom Jump, then none of us take Dawkins as a prophet. We accept that he's very knowledgeable in evolution, but if he makes a philosophical claim or if he makes other claims, we're not necessarily going to agree with it. So if you're actually looking and critiquing us, then Dawkins is not a representative of us. He's not a prophet or anything like that, like they do. But like you say, they want to see it as we've got to follow somebody in the way they do. And of course, that's just not the case. Maybe the lay person on the street does that, but then you just said that you are not speaking about them. You probably or hopefully are speaking more about people that have, like us, that have thought about it at least a little bit, and we don't take Dawkins to be the ultimate authority in all things.
Yeah, no, it was a very good stream. I suppose what really sort of stood out for me is that whenever we talk about the cause of the universe, and I think you obviously did touch on that quite a lot during the stream, whenever you sort of start discussing possibilities, rational possibilities of how the universe came into existence, often, certain theories are sort of, brought into the arena. And as soon as you start challenging those theories, they say, oh, what we don't know, almost to sort of stop the discussion.
Now, it's a shame that Abbas starts off so early making this statement. Now, he's had the privilege, I would say, of speaking to somebody like Skydive Phil in Speaker's Corner, who's probably one of the most knowledgeable, non-professional people in terms of cosmologists. He's not a professional cosmologist or whatever. He's an amateur by his own words, but certainly the most knowledgeable non-professional person that I've ever seen or heard in Speaker's Corner. And they've had multiple conversations, and his summary is similar to Abbas's, right? When you start to challenge them, they say we don't know. No, that's not what we've said. And again, if that's the summary that you can take away from somebody who's like Skydive Phil, for example, then what chance has anybody else got of trying to explain this to you in a way that you might understand? Maybe he's too high level for you and it's just over your head. I don't know. Maybe I can do better as a much more ignorant lay person and speak on your level. I don't know what it is. But if that's what you think, that the moment you challenge us, we suddenly say we don't know. No, that's not the case. But again, I guess maybe I need to have this conversation with him. It's two lay people speaking this so that we can get down to it. Maybe Phil just was over his head and all he took from it, as Hamza did, is I don't know. And that's just a shame that so much information was passed on and it blew right past them and all they've got is I don't know. If that's the summary of their conversation with people, then it's very sad.
I think they don't realize that if I go and I ask them, I don't know, what's the height of a tree or what's the temperature of a Coke, they will always, if they have any degree of honesty, have to answer with I don't know, because they don't know, because there are so many different heights of trees that they have to say I don't know. So if you ask a nonsensical question, do not expect a rational answer. And this is what they're doing. They're asking stupid, really amazingly obtuse questions. And then if you say, well, I don't know, how should I know? Then they say, well, you're a I don't know atheist. I don't know how they can do that, really. It's boggling the mind.
Yeah, and when we say we don't know, we base that on the consensus or the non-consensus in this particular case of the experts in the field. If the majority of cosmologists are not agreed on universal origins, then who is any other human being on this planet to make the claim that they do know or that they have better evidence than them? And if they're going to appeal simply to philosophy, well, philosophy needs to keep in step with our scientific understanding. In the past, for example, the term absolute nothing might have had some plausibility in reality. Now we know better that absolute nothing is just a concept like, a pink unicorn. And, all you can do is talk about it conceptually rather than any argument to suggest that it exists in reality. So as our discoveries and our ontology and our epistemology move forward and we understand more about the world, then philosophy keeps up, because you'll see that none of them can argue from a scientific point of view. That they've got no chance on. So all they can appeal is to old, outdated philosophical ideas of, and we'll hear it probably here again. And you need to keep up and you need to stay in lockstep with our discoveries and so forth, because otherwise we're just going to reject the old Aristotelian type approaches. Well, infinite is impossible because you couldn't reach this moment of now. I mean, this is just such nonsense these days, especially with what's the understandings that theoretical physicists and cosmologists have now of the concept of infinities, both mathematically and from a ontological point of view. So,
and turn it to the theist and say, well, prove to me that there's a creator. And I think it's unfair. And I'll just very briefly sort of explain why it's unfair. Because really, rationally, there are only two possibilities. There is a material cause to the universe, or it wasn't caused, it was always there, which still means it was just material, or there's a supernatural cause to the universe. Now,
well, that's not the only two options. It's either the universe had some sort of cause or it's past eternal. Those are the two options. I'm not aware of a third option. I'm open to the possibility, but either it had some sort of beginning or it's past eternal.
Yeah,
if there's a material
he's already refuting himself. He's contradicting himself. There's two possibilities and he names three. So I don't know what he's on about. The funny thing is, why can't they do just 10% of what we do? Before I go and make any kind of a comment regarding Islam, I go and study Islam. Before I make any kind of a comment on the evolution of the universe or biological evolution, I go and do some basic research. So at least I understand the basics. At least I don't embarrass myself right from the word go. Why can't they do that? Why can't they at least try and understand what a non-believer thinks about certain things and why they say these things, instead of jumping to conclusions and say, you're a non-believer, you must be doing this, you must be thinking this, you must be believing this. It's insulting, actually. If I were the kind of person who would be easily offended, I would feel offended. I think this is utterly ridiculous that I am being confronted again and again by these Muppets who think that they have some sort of an idea what I am thinking. And then they say, you're saying this, so that means you're thinking that. No, I am not. Go and do some basic research.
I think that the basic thing, which is what I put to Hamza later on, is don't make assumptions. Ask questions about your particular interlocutor. But I think the other thing stops is some people, not all theists, so I'm not going to make a general claim for all theists, although I think it's underlying, it might well be the case, but I can't demonstrate that. But certainly with at least some of these guys, if not all of them, they start with a presupposition that God exists. And then they're looking in the world to confirm that. They're not looking in the world to disconfirm it. And I think that's the big thing, right? So they start with this particular view. And so, if there's a God, then the universe must have had a beginning. Although, depending on your view of God, I mean, an eternal universe could have existed alongside God. But if you're going to claim that God is all-powerful, then that probably would be problematic for you. Because here's something that is not God that also exists eternally. That would probably be contradictory, depending on the nature of God that you're talking about. But I do think that that's how they start. They start from the presupposition, and then anything that seems to confirm their view, they're going to gravitate very strongly towards that. Anything disconfirms it, they automatically, and we all do that to some degree, but I do see the bias is extremely strong with these guys. And like you say, they're very unlikely to look closely at opposing opinions or even understand them at a higher level.
Yeah, but Rob, even the different methodologies that they apply, what happens with infinite regression? Why is it they cannot get a hold on infinite regression? Why can't they understand infinity? Why can't they understand the basic concepts they are using each and every time? They should by now know what they are saying is nonsense. So I don't know
I think
why they can't do
two
that.
reasons. One is that they hear something and it sounds intuitively plausible, and so they run with it. But the other is the alternatives are counterintuitive, like a universe, got the Gotten-Lee model, where the universe can go back and through a curve, a closed timeline curve, and create itself. Now, to most people, that sounds
the Richard Gott model.
Yeah, so that sounds impossible, right? Until you discover that, in fact, general relativity allows for that sort of behavior. And so, and nothing violates that. But to the normal human who sees the passage of time, the arrow of time moving sequentially in one direction, that seems impossible. So some of the stuff, especially universal origins and quantum mechanics, are counterintuitive. And so, that boggles the brain. And if you don't want to go down there and you have a simplistic view of the world, in a sense, then you're not going to spend a lot of energy, brain power, to whatever degree you have it, exploring those things when you've already got an answer. To them, I'm guessing, if I put myself in their mindset or attempt to, then why would you waste time doing that when you've already got the answer? So that's probably why.
Through induction or deduction, however you want to put it, there's a certain premise that you can set up as to how it could have come into existence. So it either had a material cause, it either always existed, it came into existence by itself, came into existence because of another material cause. And if you analyze those individual sort of points, and these are the sort of things that always come up, and I know, Hamza, you've discussed, the beginning of the universe, even with scientists who've showed up, the guy with the big hair who showed up at Speaker's Corner, me and Imran and you, Hamza, we've had lots of discussions with Skydive Phil, who's very well versed with science. He certainly knows a hell of a lot more than me. And these are the models that always come up. And yet, if you look at these models, there are huge holes in these models. And I think anyone who relies on these models has to be believing something. And I use the word believe without evidence. Because if you look at, for example...
It's a model. It's a model. That's exactly the point of a model.
Yeah, but I think, Skydive Full has gone into this in much more depth. And that's why it's such a shame that they're not paying attention. Like I say, maybe it's just over their head. And so it's not easy to understand. And he's trying to dumb it down for people, myself included. And I'm trying to pay attention to it, and I get at least some of it. But for them, it's just, I think it becomes very complicated. It's like trying to explain, differential calculus. I think most people's heads would go, this is extremely complicated, and the brain kind of switches off. When it becomes very taxing for the brain, with the slow and fast thinking. I can't remember the book, right? But the brain goes into, not overwhelm, but it becomes very arduous on the brain, and it's much more likely to want to take a break, in a sense. And of course, Darren Brown exploits this as well in his way. The way you can get a brain into overwhelm, and there's certain tactics you can use on the brain to get people to do things they would otherwise not normally do. And I think that to some degree this is the case. But it's a shame that's the view. And he says there's big holes. If there really is, that just sort of shows me his misunderstanding, or his lack of understanding rather, that he can claim there's big holes. If Sean Carroll or any of the physicists explained it, A, it'd be over his head, but B, do you think they haven't thought about what you claim as simplistically as big holes? And to the degree that they don't know something, you're going to say they're going to know it. And if you're going to jump on and say, hey, well, they don't know something, well, that's an uninteresting claim. There's plenty of things humans don't know. So to point that out as if that's a knockdown argument against them, I think is uncharitable, to say the least.
Always existed. Well, either you believe in a static model, which, as far as I know, no scientist really, or hardly anyone accepts that, or you believe in this cyclic universe, where it just simply always was, and it simply goes back to itself, and it's happened infinitely in that way, with no beginning, but it still requires an explanation. Where does all this matter, energy, and everything else originate from? Where does it come from? It always existed is a faith-based reasoning, quite frankly, because there's no material, analytical, or empirical evidence.
No, it's a hypothesis, and faith is believing something without good reasons or evidence. And scientists, generally speaking, as far as I can tell, don't do that. So you're conflating faith with a hypothesis, and they're not just rolling out of their bed and say, hey, let's just make shit up today because we're bored or we haven't got anything to do, or because, quote, we want to refute religion. Scientists really don't care about religion. I mean, most of them are way past that anyway. So, I mean, this is just sophistry, really.
Evidence to support that claim. So then you're left with, came into existence by itself, which in itself is illogical, because I think intuitively nothing produces nothing.
There you go. That's the appeal to intuition, right? That's an
the
informal
magic word.
fallacy. I can't understand it. Intuitively, I'm going to go with this. And that's why I say general relativity, quantum mechanics is counterintuitive. The last thing you should be using when you're talking about those advanced, unintuitive topics is your intuition. You are destined to fail. You're actually setting yourself up to fail if that's what you're going to use.
Nothing, if we're truly talking about nothingness, right? Came into existence by a material cause. Well, then that material cause needs an explanation.
By the way, notice that this wasn't any of the three questions. This was not really discussed and wasn't one of the actual points from the original live stream. But this is Abbas's favorite hobby horse, so that's no problem. I mean, like I say, he has been, I don't like the word, but he has been schooled by Skydive Phil. But unfortunately, it's like, he was absent from the class. He was sitting there, or his ghost was sitting there, or something was sitting there. Like maybe it was his clone or his twin or something, and he was absent for the day. So, but again, if you have that view and you have a view that, God is your starting point, then anything that's going to challenge that, you're going to be far more resistant to taking new information in. And he's seemingly quite a good example of that.
Yeah, but if he's been talking to Skydive Phil, why? And I'm asking this with tears in my eyes. Why doesn't he go home and then say, what did this guy actually say? Let me go and spend 15 minutes just looking at these things, just to understand the basics, just to understand the differences and all the possibilities that there are, instead of sitting here making a fool of himself and saying, well, there's only this and only this, and my intuition says, well, it should be red.
But he said it, Stops. He said it, right? It's his intuition. He's not going to go further than his intuition.
And
if his intuition tells it something,
you do it exactly. Yeah.
And it matches and it confirms his current belief, well, that's it. Then he can sleep safely at night, right? So why would that's why I say you're looking at it externally, and I think we can hang our heads and facepalm and all of that, but if we put ourselves into their world to whatever degree, as uncomfortable as it may be, then I think the answer is clear. So I think asking that question is just going to get you frustrated. We can see that you don't want to expend a lot of brain power when you think you've already got the answer, plus it's intuitive and it confirms what you already believe. Well, the job is done, right? And then let's move on.
Or go spend 10 minutes with a cosmologist instead of coming here speaking to non-believers regarding gods. Nobody here is an expert in this particular field. So all we can do is just give our common knowledge that we have, our education, however basic it may be. But I don't, if I am so interested, like I'm not, why, if they are so interested in this, why don't they go speak to the experts instead of to us? So,
well, they did, and they didn't get a lot out of it, right? So I don't think speaking to experts, at least with some of them, is very much help. I mean, compared to the rest of us, Skydive Phil is an expert on cosmology. He's not a professional, and he doesn't claim to be. But compared to the rest of the lay people, he's an expert. And so they have spoken to an expert, and they got nothing out of it. So speaking to anybody else, I think, is pointless. But I think Stops. It's really going to frustrate you, and I would invite you not to try and think about why they aren't doing this. I think the answer is pretty straightforward. Otherwise, it just becomes frustrating.
Yeah, but Rob, what I'm seeing in the chat here is that people are saying, well, why don't you ever explain things? Why don't you ever bring counter arguments? You did. You explained it. You gave a counter argument. You showed an alternative. You did all that. But because people don't understand it, they now accuse you of saying you've never given any counter arguments, and they will go and run around and telling everybody Rob never gives any counter arguments, when you did. This is the same thing with Subur when they say, yeah, Subur rinsed you. No, he didn't. It's just that they don't understand this. They didn't see this, and they just carry on like this, and this frustrates me. It's true.
Yeah, I think I mean, I just let that go past. I'm trying to look for something substantial that somebody says, right? Now, Abbas is bringing up these claims, right? So, in a sense, at least he's bringing some content to the table. You know, somebody's asking in the chat, what caused the Big Bang? We don't know what, quote unquote, caused the Big Bang. And it is true to say that either something caused it, i.e., there was a prior cause, or in some way, the universe, whatever we mean by the universe, or whatever cosmologists mean, is past eternal. That seems to me to be the two options. Whatever the cause is, let's say we could rule out a past eternal universe, which, you know, a fair amount of cosmologists do lean towards. Then we'd have to ask, well, what could be the cause, you know, of the universe? And how you establish scientifically that God is the most reasonable explanation, I've still never heard anything like that. You could try, I think the only thing left really for theists in general is philosophical arguments, but they do need to be based on our best understanding of reality and not old, you know, outdated Aristotelian type arguments. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, but we
An
don't even know
explanation.
if there was a cause. This is the whole point. You know, you need to stop this.
Yeah. So we don't know what, I mean, presumably there's a cause of the Big Bang, but the Big Bang isn't the beginning of the universe necessarily anyway. So whatever the cause was, you know, that's as far as we can go at this stage, or that's my understanding at least.
You just admitted that you're
And
a
if you-
numpty. Okay, then every single human being on this planet is a numpty, because no human being on this planet actually knows what caused the Big Bang.
And people will assert things, of course, but they don't have good evidence for it. So
Have another material cause and another material cause. Clearly, you go into the infinite regress, which is a complete nonsense of the entire thing, because as you've pointed out, Hamza, as Imran has pointed out, if you have an infinite past, you can't get to the present.
okay, let's quickly deal with this. I don't know where they get this understanding from. Again, maybe they've got some bad version of a philosophical
But this is
argument.
what
I
I'm
mean,
talking about, right? This is exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah, I mean, you know, people like Sir Roger Penrose have no problem with this, and cosmologists, theoretical physicists have no problem with a past eternal universe. And this idea that you couldn't get to now is a flawed idea, and the use of the sniper asking his lieutenant and so forth is a flawed analogy. That's why whenever a Muslim brings up an analogy, I'm immediately 99 times out of 100, I'm already going, I'm just looking for the flaw in the analogy, because it happens almost every single time. In fact, I can't remember a time when they haven't brought up a flawed analogy. So, but again, they're appealing to their intuition. They're using flawed analogies, and then they're concluding that a past eternal universe couldn't be possible because you couldn't get to now. Who says you couldn't get to now? What the hell do you mean by? I mean, if I try to ask Abbas what he means by this, I don't think he could actually have a coherent, let alone substantial response to this. But because they've heard it before and they're repeating what they've heard, it sounds like it makes sense. And because it's an echo chamber, you know, when it echoes and it sounds like it makes sense and they're all saying the same thing, well, they just take it for granted. But then myself or anybody else comes in and tries to critique them on this, then you'll find that they will really battle to actually get anything out that is coherent.
There is no universe, because you'd be infinitely simply going back in time. There is no going forward, and that's the sort of fallacy, you know, of the infinite regression. Now, what the atheist does is he says, "Oh, but we're not making any claims. You're making the claim about theism, about God, so you need to provide the evidence." But that's not true. They are making a claim, and their claim is that the universe came into existence without this creation or creator who brought it into existence. That is a claim.
Okay, so let's just be clear. He's partly true, at least from my point of view, in one sense. Atheism does entail that the universe was not created by a teleological mind of some sort. That is entailed in atheism. Unless you're some atheist that believes in some sort of intelligence that's not a god, I don't know what that would mean. So I think we are committed to the idea that whatever the origin of the universe, if there is some sort of origin to it, then we are committed to the idea that it wasn't a teleological mind. I'm fine to accept that. I'm fine with that. But again, if somebody asks me, I say to them, I don't know what the origin of the universe is, because the consensus with cosmologists does not know. And I'm not in a position to suggest that I know better than them and I have evidence that would sway me one way or the other. So that's the position. And you guys are saying that you're taking a positive position on one of the two, let's call them horns of the dilemma. It's not a dilemma, but you're taking a positive position one way or the other. And you do need to provide the evidence. I can tell you why I'm undecided, and I just have, I've discharged my burden. I agree that there's something, I've got to justify why I believe something, whatever I believe, but I've just discharged it. That's as far as I go. If I could go further, I would. I can't. But you guys are taking a positive position, so you do need to justify that. And because I don't know doesn't mean that I can't critique you. This is a fallacy that Hamza is still deeply flawed in. He's still hypnotized by this idea that, hey, if you don't know, you can't critique my positive claim. Of course you can. I mean, that's just, anybody, that's where Yusuf Ponders can maybe educate him, possibly, I don't know.
And so they have to provide evidence of how a universe comes into existence by itself, or one of the other models that have existed.
Yeah, there's plenty of cosmological models. If you take a few moments to look at it, okay, some of the complex maths and some of it is difficult to understand, but the basic premise is not particularly difficult to understand. It might be counterintuitive, but it's not difficult to understand. And there are models that are past eternal, where a universe creates itself, the cyclic models, there are a bunch of models, and none of them have been disproven. Some of them are less favorable than others, but at this stage, none of them have been disproven. And I've been lucky enough to sit and listen to interviews with Sir Roger Penrose and Richard Gott, to say two, and there's a couple of others that I don't remember the names of. I actually went along with Sky Duffel and we interviewed them personally. So I've been sitting there listening to these guys.
Now, the fact that they have to rely on one of these models means that it's a faith-based religious belief, basically, because there's no evidence to.
Yeah, I know. Don't get too triggered with the faith-based thing. You and I agree that that's a.
No, I'm looking at the first part. No, we do not. I do not, for example. Rob does, I don't. I am completely unbiased towards anything. All I know is that nobody so far has provided any evidence that it's a God. I'm not saying it's not a God. I'm not saying what it is. I don't have any idea. I don't have any bias towards anything. I am not drawn to any model. I am totally, totally open to any suggestion, because there is absolutely nothing substantial that would say this is more likely, this is more. No, anything is possible. We are speculating. And that's, so the first part of his sentence is totally, totally wrong.
Let me just check in with you then to make sure we're on the same page at least. Do you think that from our point of view, we are committed to the idea that it's less likely that a God created the universe than there's some other explanation? Okay, yes. Well, that's fine. That's good enough for me. Yeah, that's fine. And if somebody said to you, why is that the case? I mean, presumably you could give a reason. So that's all we need to do.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you could discharge it. And that's all you need to do. And I think that's more than satisfactory. If we asked them, do you whatever claim about Islam, and they said, I don't know, I'm not going, and I said, well, why is it that you don't know? And they said, whatever it is, unless it was irrational, or it was totally unreasonable. I'm like, okay, no problem. I can't press you any further than that. You've discharged why you believe it. And that's as far as you can go. I'm less concerned when somebody says, I don't know. And actually, I think oftentimes that's an intellectually honest position to take. And you would still have a reason for why you don't know, and then we can move on. But I think for them, they take it as a big weakness, where I think it's a strength. So we're obviously on different sides of the coin there.
I just want to say something. The right reaction.
Support those.
This is not the sort of channel that we might expand into this. Who knows? But at the moment, we are focusing on critiquing, reviewing, and commenting on other videos. On the Gin and Tonic show, there we can go and discuss things. There you can come and you can come on the panel and you can discuss them. There we are not set. Here we have a bit of a time frame. We have some constraints which we don't have on the Gin and Tonic show. And we can always go and talk to people on the Discord channel. This is exactly what it's for. There you can discuss things. But here now, to interrupt everything and say, okay, we're going to stop critiquing and reviewing and commenting on the video just to go and address your specific queries or something, that is unfair. That is why we're not doing it. So I hope I'm explaining this in the right way, Rob. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, right reaction is Ralph. So I know Ralph. He's obviously the Christian.
Okay.
And we're happy to have that conversation. And you emailed him about having discussions anyway. So myself and Stops will come on and discuss it with you and somebody else, or with other Muslims on your channel if you want, Ralph. That's fine. We can set that up. Or, like I say, you're welcome to come on the Gin and Tonic. Although there we typically will focus on Islam. So if you want to focus on challenging us, or if you want to defend Christianity, Christianity, then I think it's best we go to the Discord server to do that,
Yeah.
or we come to your channel and do that.
Yeah.
Views, right? No analytical or empirical evidence, in fact. And so when they ask, and I remember, Hamza, you discussing at the park, there are two ways of finding truth. One is to prove the truth itself. The other is to look at what the alternatives are and disprove those. And if you end up disproving the alternatives, then as Sherlock Holmes says, Hamza, and I think you've mentioned that many times before, that you are left with the only rational, reasonable, and I say reasonable
totally wrong.
possibility.
Yeah, it's called the Holmesian fallacy. It's something that was coined more recently. If you eliminate all other possibilities, then the only one that's left, however unplausible, must be the truth. Well, how do you establish, or how do you rule out any other possibility? You could only do that if you are omniscient. If you're going to go on balance of probability, well, now you're getting into muddy waters, because who's going to establish what the balance of probability is in those particular cases? So the only way that you could really do that is with like the impossibility of the contrary. If you could rule out every other view as being impossible, then I agree. And you could also establish that no other view could be possible, then you would have a case. But that's like Mount Everest. I mean, I wish you the best trying to do that. Good luck with that, but I don't fancy your chances.
Yeah. Well, the answer is however, how improbable.
Right.
So when you eliminate the impossible,
Yeah.
whatever's left, no matter.
Okay, but there he said it himself. You eliminate the impossible. Right, now the burden is on you, and that's a tremendous burden you are taking on. You don't seem to realize it because you say it very quickly. But if you're going to rule out the impossible, that's true, I agree. If you rule out the impossible and the impossibility of any other model or any other explanation that you are currently unaware of, then it would be the case. But that burden, I think you're just too cavalier. You don't realize what a burden that is that you're taking on.
How improbable has to be the truth. So
And that's the point.
That's
Right.
the gist of it. But what I find amazing about atheists, to be honest with you, they're proud, so proud, saying, we say we don't know. We simply say we don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying you don't know. And I agree. And I agree, yeah. If you say you don't know, you don't know. But when I say, well, I believe this, and you say you're wrong, then you go, whoa, wait a minute, you don't know. So you just said you don't know. And now you're telling me I'm wrong about something you don't know about. And this...
Okay, it depends which atheist you're speaking to. What we're going to say is, why do you believe X when the vast majority of cosmologists in this case are undecided on the case? There'll be some for, there'll be some against. There's no consensus on this for you. Why is it that that's the case for you? We're not automatically going to say you're wrong, but we are going to, or at least I'm going to say to you, why are you taking a positive position on that? What's your evidence that the rest of the world seems unaware of, at least the people that are experts in the field? And you can cherry pick one of their models that fits your narrative, and I can cherry pick one that counters your narrative. And what are we going to do then, right? So at this stage, I think the most honest answer is that we are undecided about the origin of the universe, because anything you cherry pick, I can do a cherry pick of the opposite position, and the position remains stalemate if you're intellectually honest.
This is the inconsistency for me. This is what you lose me at that point. That's when I realize you're insincere, because if you don't know something, then be quiet about it. If I can have an opinion about it, you could say, well, I don't believe that's true. You can't say it's not true because you don't know, as you just admitted. And I don't think you realize that. You can hide behind don't know, like we had don't know of the gaps. You remember? Don't know. I'll make skydive fill again. Don't know. All right.
I mean, this is just, this is, face bombing.
This is bad.
Sad. It's sad, really, that I don't know is what he got from skydive fill. I mean, it's, again, another student who wasn't in class. It's just, what can you do? I mean, and that's why I think, somebody like Hamza is probably very resistant to learning something new, especially something that might counter his current views, which, it is what it is. But again, I don't say that that's the case for all theists or indeed all Muslims. I think there are open-minded Muslims. There will people that will take the most charitable position and actually learn new things. So I hope Hamza is not representative of the majority. In fact, certainly not all Muslims.
That's fine. Then don't challenge my opinion then, as if you know, because you don't. So I find really ironic, to be honest.
There's also the weird thing of how, you'll talk about atheism and they'll say, oh, well, it's just a lack of belief. There's no proposition being put forward in atheism. And so, well, what do you refer to the people who do put propositions forward as? What is the name for the person who says, I believe that there is no God? Are they atheists? And if they...
Yeah. So again, there's, soft and weak atheism or hard and strong atheism, whatever the case is. I take the position that I do not believe a God or gods exist. Some people say I lack a belief in a God. It depends. Again, you have to ask different people. If you look at the Stanford Encyclopedia, there's different definitions there. and different philosophers arguing different things. So it depends which atheist you speak to. And you can only speak to that particular person. I used to be of the view that I lack a belief, but having thought through it, listened to some very smart people and reevaluated, I don't. All I'm saying is my negative position on what a person who's asking me is, what do you believe about the world? And in that case, I have to say I do not believe a God exists, and that's a positive claim. The lack of belief is a negative claim, and you can still hold it for sure. But I think the theist is going to go, okay, fine, you lack a belief, but what does that entail? What do you actually believe about the proposition that God exists? And I think that's where we've got to say what we believe.
They are that it's not simply this idea of the lack of proposition. It feels like they've sort of changed the definition so that they can still call themselves atheists. Whereas back in the day, it was when you spoke of atheists, you would think about the positive claim and not just this lack of belief. And the lack of belief was always referred to as agnosticism. But now they're like, no, agnosticism is sort of synonymous with atheism. So, well, why are we using these different?
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, the history is quite cloudy. There's different views on things. I take agnosticism to be the undecided position. So in the proposition that God exists, you can have the affirmative, you can have the negative. You could say I affirm it, or I dismiss it, or I'm undecided. So you can take three, you could have one of three positions. I take agnosticism to be an undecided position. And if you're going to say, well, no, that's not the position, then what do you call somebody who's undecided? And unless you want to claim that you cannot be undecided, which I think is absurd, so what do you call the undecided position, the third option? Most people, as far as most people that I've spoken to that are smarter than me, take it to be the undecided position. Maybe there's something else, right? I don't know.
Different terms. It's and then if you being an atheist is synonymous with you being agnostic, i.e., that you're just simply saying you don't know. So what's the name for the people who say that they know God doesn't exist? That they feel it is a certainty. Or like how do we deal with that? That's always weird to me.
Sorry, what was that?
It's called agnostic.
What's that? What's
it's
called
from knowledge. This is Old Greek. It's very common. If you know something, then it's gnostic.
Yeah, it depends how you use the word knowledge. Because if you don't believe something, you also automatically don't know it. So it's superfluous in that particular case. So the agnostic atheist would have to say, "Hey, I lack a belief, but I also don't know," and it's kind of superfluous. You and I have chatted about that before, and somebody that's really delved in this quite a lot is Steve McRae on the Great Debate Community. He's written blog posts. He's spoken to a number of professional philosophers on this, and I'm in agreement with him that the agnostic position is the undecided position, and an atheist is, I do not believe a God exists, although an atheist could say I lack a belief as well, but then you would still ask, what do you believe about the proposition? Well, anyway.
Yeah, I think it's more about like modern usage. The way it originates is different from how we use it today. This is why I always say, yeah, sure, we use it in a different way today. So, okay, that's fine. It's the evolution of words. We have that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's just an observation.
Yeah, the stream to me. Go on, Hamza.
No, go on.
The stream to me highlighted. I mean, especially when I heard that Tom speak, is that obviously Abbas, put forward some very clear-cut explanations there, but they're almost, it's like when you speak to a Quranist, they've actually got all their bases covered now. So, you're talking about infinite regression, they'll bring up the multiverse, or you bring up whatever you've got. There's kind of a list of arguments. Even if you bring up nothing, something from nothing, they've got Lawrence Krauss was given 3 reasons. As to how even describing nothing means that nothing exists, and all this kind of wordplay. What I found from the stream, especially listening to Tom, is that it's actually, I don't know about you guys, it's moved on to another level where they've kind of created so many different arguments now that I almost feel like you have to kind of know them all now to actually. But to be honest, it didn't feel fruitful to me. No. I mean, Tom was even got to the point where he was telling you that he knew how.
What's that?
I'm just saying no. This is his. I would call typical Muslim apologist approach, where you have a script, where if this comes up, then this is the response. If this comes up, then this is the response. It doesn't work like that, because what I at least do, I don't have any prefabricated response for anything. I'm doing everything on the fly. So I don't have any pre, like text, I don't know, buckets or something where I go, okay, this is the button I need to push. If the guy says this word, I need to push it. No, it doesn't work like that. And this is why they are so frustrated, because they can't use their standard tactics, their standard approach. They have to start thinking, and they can't. And this is the problem. So for him to say, well, you have to know all the arguments in order to respond to them, no, you can actually think about them and then reply.
Yeah, I think it's useful to become aware of them because, there's always something new you can learn. I mean, there's a lot of standard things, but most of us in the sphere, at least that we're talking around, are not the most sophisticated people, either theist or atheist for that matter. And there are much more sophisticated, much more complicated arguments that, very few people in the world like properly understand. But for, more lay people like us, I think we've heard many of them, but it is useful to kind of, consider something, and be aware of it, not just close yourself off to it. So yes, if you want to talk to atheists, then, or in our case, if you want to speak to theists or Muslims in our case, then we do want to know what their response is, or at least I do, and I'm sure Stops does. And every time you think, wow, I pretty much heard most things, you'll hear something else that goes, oh, okay, never thought of that, never heard of that, or whatever the case may be. Or at least maybe I do. I mean, maybe Stops has heard it all after 10 years. But every now and again, there's something new. Or at least there's a different way that somebody tries to respond to something, and you can take something from that. So here we are.
Our phone worked. And he wouldn't use a phone. So I'm thinking, so what? If the guy's got some washing to do, unless he knows how the washing machine works, he ain't going to put the clothes in. And to that extent, he was kind of, I find him an interesting character. Clearly someone who's an hour of research to literally answer any question, like a tricky opponent almost. But I didn't really get the sense that he really believed in anything. And I found that was really interesting.
He lost me when he said that he doesn't go to the doctors because he doesn't trust the doctors.
No, he didn't say that. Again, either your memory is faulty, or you're being disingenuous. He didn't say he doesn't go to the doctors. He says he doesn't trust anything that he doesn't understand. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that position. I trust things that I don't understand, but for, I think, good reasons, that these things have proved reliable in the past. Even though I don't understand them, I'm going to trust that they work, be it in an aeroplane, be it, I would go up in, SpaceX's rocket. I mean, there's some level of risk. I think when NASA did it, it was 750 to 1, which is not, you've got a much better chance of flying in a normal aircraft. But because of its reliability, certainly proven in the past, I'm going to accept, and I'm not going to need to be a rocket scientist. So in my view, I think Tom went down a road there that had they pressed him enough, they could have got him to acknowledge that, he does something without knowing how it works. But, that's his position. Not that he wouldn't go to a doctor, just that he doesn't trust things that he doesn't understand, which I think that's a very difficult position to actually defend.
And I asked him that thing, you just trust the doctor give you medicine, and he said, no, I don't really.
Well, would you trust him, Ron?
Someone says that, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's hyper-skeptic, man.
Would you trust him,
That
Ron?
guy in the cockpits asking the pilot, have you qualified before we go on our holiday to...
Do you want to explain to me why I need to put my seatbelt on? Why do I need to put this
knocking on the door?
How do you need to know how something operates to trust to use it? Like I said, the mobile phone, we're just told how it is and we believe it and we just get on with it. We don't need to know the intricate details, but he seems to know, I know how it works. And he's like, quantum mechanics or something, 3 versions of quantum mechanics around the mobile phone.
Well, I think it ups your level of confidence in whatever it is, if you do have an understanding of how it works. But humans, we've got a limited amount of time and a finite, cranial capacity. So it's, it's very unlikely that we're going to know how everything works. But once you do, then, and, you've seen its reliability, then that would give you an added level of satisfaction with whatever it is that you're being asked to, investigate or, get involved with.
I'm like, but then how is that standard for everybody else who hasn't gone into that detail?
It was a very vague answer as well. So he said, he just kind of threw quantum mechanics out there. It was like, so if I gave you all of the ingredients in just dust form and all the machinery that you needed, could you make a phone independently?
But that was not the claim, right? He just said that he understood how a phone worked. He didn't say that he could construct one, right? Again, I think you guys need to remember what a person is saying, and not, because that's a straw man, or at least a misunderstanding of what the original position was.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you can you really say you truly understand how a phone works? Or anything in general, because it is an understanding of something, not necessarily a complete understanding. Do you really
But can you notice here as well? That's why I said to Stops, right, when Stops and I were chatting, with the Muslim apologists, you've got to be very careful not to introduce other variables into a conversation, because they will go off on a tangent. They love the red herrings. They just go down that path because it takes away from the main discussion, which maybe they're not that familiar with or perhaps can't defend as well. And as soon as you make another statement, off they go down that path about this whole thing. So I think, you learn by speaking to different people, but that's definitely my the experience I've had is to introduce new variables isn't helpful in a discussion unless there's a very good reason, because they're likely to go off on a tangent along that line. And if they could disprove whatever the variable is, then they feel like they've won the argument. But actually, there's the much bigger point that, you know, they've been sidetracked off to challenge this one small little point that's been brought up. So less points, the less points that you bring up that aren't relevant, the better.
Can you get away with saying I understand how a phone works, just by like having a very general idea of the fact that it somehow involves quantum mechanics and that there's these gates that open and close or whatever? Like, is that worthy of being referred to as someone who knows how X works?
Yeah.
Because you know how to describe a part of X and not in its totality.
Yeah. What I found really amazing when I said to the three atheists, if God proved himself to you, appeared to you, the thing you crave, the evidence, the empirical observable evidence, yeah, would you follow what God says? No.
Okay, the fact that he's credulous about this just tells me that he doesn't understand. And of course, every atheist would accept that if the evidence was overwhelming, well, we hope that they would if they were rational, they would accept a God. But the question is, would they follow the commands? And I agree with Tom on this one. I'm entirely, and it stops you, tell me your thoughts. If he said do X, I want to know why. I don't take it that it's a priori that because he's God, he's automatically good. Because again,
remember, I'm one of them.
I don't think they can escape. I don't think they can escape the view that I don't know how they could disprove Satan pretending to be God. If Satan is as powerful or close to as powerful as God and is emulating God, they have no access to that unless they're going to appeal to something outside of God. So even if God did, and he said, "Hey Rob, you know, sacrifice your firstborn child on the altar," I'm going to say, "Why are you asking me to do that?" Under any other circumstances, I cannot think of any circumstance on earth where I would do that, or almost none. Even if it were even if it meant the loss of many other lives, the bond I have with my child, for example, is stronger than the people that I don't know. Although objectively you look outside and you go, is that an entirely moral thing? No, probably not. But then again, you're going against the nature that you supposedly gave us. So of course we're going to ask, why you're not just going to accept it. But this also shows the mindset, right? They think that God is automatically good. They don't know that there's a problem with this. And so they're just going to accept it. If he is God, well, I'm just going to do what he says. And the rest of us aren't. We're going to ask that question. If he could demonstrate in some way that he was omnibenevolent, then I'm more likely to do it. But I still want to, I've been supposedly gifted with the brain to be curious, and I'm still going to ask, well, why is that? Because to me, God, that doesn't seem right. Okay, you're God, and even if you knew everything, but why are you asking me to do something that to me sounds immoral, right? Counterintuitive. If I've got this curiosity, I want to know why. But for these guys, presumably, no, you don't need to know why. You just need to follow instructions.
Well, remember, I'm one of the people who managed to get on the panel, who was allowed on there, and he asked me, and this is one of the three that he's referring to who said no, because I also said the same thing. I said, no, I'm not going to follow automatically.
Correct. But they laugh as if this is like either somehow ridiculous or whatever. But again, sophisticated theists wouldn't do that. Sophisticated theists understand it better. They understand at least some of them do understand our critiques. And to them, it's not ridiculous, right? But it does tell you the level of sophistication of a theist who laughs at this, as if this is absurd. And even if you try to explain why it's not absurd, I don't think it would land with any significant level of force that it would take time to be evaluated in any significant way.
That really got me as well. Because
like, what?
Yeah. It's because then they're anti-theists. It's not just atheists, they're anti-theists.
Yeah, but that's not the reason. Yes. Well, some of us are anti-theist. I am. I don't know if Stops if you are. I don't know if Tom is. I think he might be, but I won't speak for him. But that's not the reason that we wouldn't follow God. I mean, and I've just explained why. Right? It's not that the fact that I think religion is or God is more likely evil than it is good. I've got reasons for that. But that isn't in and of itself. If you could demonstrate that he's all good, then I'm more likely to follow. But I still want the why.
And it's this emotional narrative in the neo-atheist culture of the theist God being such a bad guy.
Yeah, I've done. I won't go on it with this stream, but I did some research. I know. I think Imran, you saw my stream where it was sort of to do with perhaps because they look at theists and say that they need God, Whereas I think when you twist it around, their resentment to God and what motivates them to continue, continue debating for something they don't believe in, I've always found bizarre. I just want to say before I sort of my view.
Yeah, I think Jordan's new at this, so we'll cut him some slack. We all had to learn at some point, so he is where he is. I just want to hear that again, just quickly, that last few seconds there. Sorry.
This stream, but I did some research. I think Imran, you saw my stream where it was sort of to do with perhaps because they look at theists and say that they need God, whereas I think when you twist it around, their resentment to God and what motivates them to continue debating for something they don't believe in.
That's it. Continue debating for what they don't believe in. We continue debating because you guys keep telling us that you've got the truth and you're trying to give reasons. So if you stop doing that, there wouldn't be a conversation. If you kept it to yourself, kept it behind closed doors, and when you came out here, nobody knew what anybody believed about metaphysical claims, I wouldn't be going out there telling you guys what you must believe or why I think you're wrong. We just get on with life if we had similar values, and that's it. But you guys come out of the house, you all want to tell us what you think and why you think it's true, and then you want society to follow your rules, and obviously we're gonna challenge you on that. So, I mean, I think that's just an absurd observation.
Are you reading
found bizarre.
Are you reading the caption there? This is the live stream where you guys misrepresent what T-Jab said.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he was pushing back quite a lot, that fellow in the chat, and of course he was one of the lone voices doing so.
We
I just want to say
we've managed 15 minutes and we've been going for 1 hour.
Yeah, maybe we need to speed it up.
And you've
really,
already sped up the talking from their side.
Yeah, I'm speaking. They're speaking 1.25 times, and it's still
Can I speak at 1.25 as well? Okay, but what do we do? Shall we just continue, even though it's longer than 1 hour, or do you think we should limit it to 1 hour, or is
no? Let's carry on until you and I
fine?
get tired. Yeah, I think 2 or 3 hours is fine. Those who want to watch can watch. If they want to stop, that's fine as well. I think some people at least seem to enjoy it. So I don't think it's a case with these sort of critiques that people are going to stop straight, halfway through. I wouldn't if I was listening. So I'm going to take it. At least some people will want to continue. But they can always stop it and come back.
If I see these monsters of 3-4 hours, I don't even start.
Yeah, I mean, some people won't. That's true. But otherwise, we're going to have 10 parts. I mean, we can stop if you feel like it. But I mean, we've got a long way to go.
No, I'm just talking in general. I don't know
hour.
what the audience is because I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for other people to listen to our opinion and to see what we are picking up here. So I don't know if people are fine with this. Okay, I just know for myself I'm not. So yeah.
All right, well, let's do another hour and see how we get on.
Okay.
I mean, they did a 3-hour one. So I guess we could do a couple of hours on theirs at least.
So my view of the streams, I think for me, I think mashallah, I think all the brothers did well. I think for me, when I heard that Imran was going to do, you were going to try and do the problem of evil without Islam, I thought, whoa, how's that? Because obviously I think for me explaining that, I would always need to explain about, God being all wise. And but mashallah, you did a great job in taking evil off them. And obviously, obviously just asking that question presupposes a God. But I thought the analogies you gave and everything I thought they were spot on. And definitely.
Okay, just so people know, I mean, there's a lot we could say on that. It doesn't presuppose God, and his argument was a terrible one, that, hey, evil presupposes the teleological mind. No, it presupposes a mind. I would agree with that. And although there's some people that suggest it doesn't, right? If evil is in fact intrinsic in the universe in some way, I don't take that position, but there are some philosophers and atheists that do, then it doesn't presuppose a mind. So whichever way you are, that's not the case. But we could nitpick every single thing, but we'd be here for 10 hours. So maybe Stops and I will just, if we don't hit something, it doesn't mean that we haven't heard it. It's just that we're going to try and keep it to the bigger things rather than nitpick every single thing that they're saying, like that point you made there. It's not that I didn't hear it or I disagree with it, but it just extends the stream quite a long time.
If somebody does hear something that we are not reacting to and would like us to react on this, well, then you can just tell us. Just push one enter, catch our attention, go and ask the question, then we can always go back if you want to.
Yeah, if somebody says that, if they feel like there's an essential point or a big point that we've missed, we might not have missed it. We might not have thought it's as big, but if you do, then let us know in some way.
I was worried that we were going to stray into religion because we wanted to keep the stream completely off religion. And I was thinking, Imran, how are you going to do that? How you know,
Yeah.
how are you going to say limited time on earth and forever in paradise? You're not going to be able to do that without bringing religion into it. And you smashed it, bro. Right? The reason I put this statement on, so this is a live stream where you guys misrepresent what T-Jump said, right? This guy's been all over my comment section on the stream.
I want to know what he thinks has been misrepresented already, because
Right.
we've not really
So this
said
is your
much.
opportunity. This is his opportunity to come onto this stream when we put the link out and explain yourself, because he's been in my comment section all morning. So I'd love to see if he's brave enough to jump on and
Yeah, I'd love to see him disagree with obviously what we said about Dawkins, because I mean, Sabor and yourself showed him the video about 4 times, and it took him a while to actually admit anything. He was kind of, I've never seen anyone dance around anything like that.
Yeah, it was really weird. I pulled up the quote here again as well, just to kind of like put an emphasis on something I think really wasn't honed in on. So he says, but if your aim is to kill religion, and then he emphasizes as mine is, and then he gets that massive like round of applause and you go Dawkins, you legend, and then everyone proper buzzes off him. And then he says, then since so he's linking what follows that to that very statement. So like his aim is to kill religion. So he makes that very clear in that video. And then he says, and then since evolution is manifestly true, if there are people out there who really believe that, if you are an evolutionist, you've got to be an atheist. And all I've got to do is persuade them of evolution. So he was making it very clear that
I'm going to fool the
persuading them
people.
he was persuading them off evolution for goal of killing religion, and admitting that, you know, doing that with the inference based on the fact that evolution somehow is necessarily connected to atheism. He said at the beginning, as like Imran pointed out again, and I'm sure Sabor like kind of reined it in a few more times. The very first statement was that there's no necessary connection between evolution and atheism. So like he's admitting that there's no necessary connection. Then he's admitting that his aim, his purpose in life, like his telos, is to destroy religion, and then he's happy and willing to completely neglect the false inference for the purpose of simply making them atheist. And that is...
Okay, just so the reason we're not interjecting here again is because we've covered this already. There's a misunderstanding here. We're not going to cover it again. Please go back to part 3. Otherwise, we have to go through the whole thing again. I will quickly answer the comment in the chat there about Ali Dawah. Can you debunk Ali Dawah's sock theory? Yes, Ali Dawah says, hey, what's more complex, my sock or this phone, right? And the question you need to ask Ali at this point is, what is your criteria for something being more complex? Because and what I did with him once is I had a water bottle and I had a teacup, I think, and I said, which of these is more complex? And he never answered the question, right? He's appealing to intuition, but he won't give a criteria, because all you need to debunk it is to show a counterexample where something is less complex, or you just take complex to mean is made up of a lot of parts. Maybe it's complex. It's like a designer, something with a phone. You know, somebody would say, oh, well, a phone is much more more complex than a sock. Well, what's your criteria for that? Is it the intricacy of the circuitry? Well, if by that nature, if I'm going to go with a naturalistic view, I say, okay, well, what about a snowflake? That's more complex. Look at the intricacy there. That's more complex. Therefore, it's, you know. So you can always bring a counterexample to the complex argument. But the biggest thing is just to get him to agree to our criteria, because whatever the criteria is, you very likely can bring a counterexample that shows that his quote-unquote complexity argument is doesn't hold up. But the other thing you can do is also say, well, I take simplicity to be a hallmark of design, not complexity. And so then that would be a counter view that you could put, and you could put down the goal of something. So I take, you know, design to be a simple goal in mind. The more complex, the less likely it is that it's been done by a higher order intelligence, right? So that's another counter view you could take on that. It's not part of the stream, but I thought I'd quickly answer that for you. There's probably other things you could say as well that I'm missing. Stops. I don't know if you want to jump in on the sock is more complex or whatever.
No.
All right, cool.
Dishonest. That's and then he said, oh, what was the quote? I've got it here. Do you think it's dishonest to teach people facts? But that's not the only thing we're pointing out here. It's not just a case of teaching someone facts. It's doing so and knowing that the presence of a particular fact will lead them to make a false inference, and then not pulling them up on it, just neglecting that completely, and being aware of the fact that they've made a false inference, and then just stepping away because, you know, khalas, I've got my my goal is to destroy religion. From the statement itself, it makes it very clear that he's not bothered about whether or not it's through genuine inferences or false inferences, and he's not going to bother correcting the person or going.
I just like to point out one small thing here, and I think this is highly disingenuous, because that is exactly what a Muslim apologist is doing. That is exactly how this EFDawah guy, this Hamza guy, is getting people to say the Shahada. They are giving them false arguments, but totally false arguments. They're not giving them facts. They're not giving them anything that is to do with reality. And all they want is to give them to get the Shahada. What Professor Dawkins is doing, on the other hand, is giving people facts. He's giving them true information and then letting them do the thought process of doing anything. What a Muslim apologist does is completely different.
Thank you so much, Mohsen Khan. Abbas keeps talking about consequences in the stream. Aren't consequences are irrelevant to morality? Someone needs to correct him on this. I think just clarify what you mean, unless Stops gets that straight away. It depends whether you're a consequentialist or whether you think consequences do guide morality in any way. Different people have different ideas. There's a great deal of different moral systems out there. So it very much depends on what moral system you have. If you're a consequentialist, then consequences are very much part of your moral system. So it depends on which system you have. So thank you again very much for the super chat. That's much appreciated. I'm not sure if we'll do a show on bad design. But I think, again, there was something I was thinking of while you were speaking, and it'll come back to me, I'm sure, as we go through.
By the way, you might believe in evolution now. That doesn't necessarily...
yes, that was the thing. If they're gonna hold Dawkins to this standard, then we can do the same with the Muslims, and we could say the following. Okay, Muslims, you know that there are major critiques against your view. You also claim, or at least some of you claim, that to really understand Islam and to be informed, you've got to read in Arabic. So instead of taking people's shahada in the park, what you guys should be doing is saying, hey, I'm not going to take your shahada. What I want you to do is go and read the Quran entirely. Let's have some in-depth discussions. I want to answer any quick queries you have. Plus, I want you to go and learn it in Arabic. And then once you've read the Quran, you've understood it in Arabic, and you are sure that this is right for you, then please come and take the shahada. If you don't do that, you're being dishonest, because you're not telling them what you tell ex-Muslims when they leave, which is, hey, they didn't really understand it, they don't understand Arabic, or any other excuses you guys give. So if you're going to play by that standard, I can accuse you guys of doing exactly the same thing.
Well, that was
necessarily entail atheism. If all you have to do was throw that in.
Sorry?
That was the point I was trying to make.
What's that? Oh, sorry. Okay, great.
And then maybe T-Jump would have had a genuine foot to stand on. But he was, for whatever reason, trying to kind of rein it in on this idea that Dawkins has no responsibility over their ignorance. But if he's trying to lead them down a particular path and knows that it's a false inference that's going to take them to that conclusion, i.e. atheism, then he has a responsibility, because he's the one holding their hand and guiding them through it.
Okay, and Rob again.
You want to say something? Go for it.
Yeah, it's the same thing, actually. It's the limited mindset. No, Professor Dawkins doesn't lead, and I don't necessarily follow. It is not the same setup as in Islam. You don't have this lead and follow and this scholar and I need to go and follow them. No, it doesn't work like that. I am perfectly capable of taking something on board that somebody says to me, whether he's a professor or not, go and evaluate that, and then for me decide whether it is applicable or not. I am perfectly at liberty to do that. I am not obliged to follow. And this is the big mistake that he's making. Dawkins is not leading other people. He is providing the facts, he's providing the information, and what the person does with that is up to him. That's how easy it is. I don't know why he can't understand that.
Just quickly on this one here. By the way, I asked this a lot of Muslims, so maybe this guy will have a go. So you destroyed. Again, I just asked this question, right? I've never had an answer from a Muslim yet, but maybe this online dunya is gonna blow us away with his intellectual prowess. So go ahead and tell me something that Sabur destroyed me on that turned out to be true that I thought was false. I'll say the question again slowly so that it can reach your brain. Tell me one thing that Sabur said or destroyed me on that turned out to be true that I thought was false. And I will wait for you to actually bring something substantive, or perhaps you will actually demonstrate an actual infinite, which is eternally never bringing me, or infinitely not answering that question. Easy way to separate.
So fascinated by this, eh?
And if you are trying to be honest, you would put forward that point. By the way, evolution doesn't necessarily.
Tom never said sorry, is it T-Jump? Is that
T-Jump?
Never,
Yeah, Tom Jump.
he never made the claim that evolution disproves God. But I think I remember what happened is I think Sabor brought that argument, or Hamza, and he came on, and the typical atheist kind of response is, well, we don't all believe that. So it's a way of kind of dodging, but I think Sabor made it clear that, that this argument is out there, whereas he came on and said, no one claims that. And that's quite a common recurrence as well that I see amongst the atheist sort of debaters, is because obviously in Islam, there's things that we're held to, but an atheist can sort of duck and dive. Oh, we don't believe that part. They can kind of select things in a debate.
Yeah,
yes, we can select things. You're absolutely right, Jordan. We can evaluate things and we select things. We are not dogmatically held to a 1400-year-old book that we need to defend against all reason.
You can even update.
Yeah. And it's a bit annoying as well, because later on when he brought up the Phil paper survey, he started saying we believe X, or philosophers believe X, Y, Z. But the thing is I checked the paper out. There was 931 participants of the paper. Hopefully this is the same paper he was talking about, but it's a survey on Phil. I can pull it up actually. I've got it here. I did have it. Yeah, so I'll post a link. I don't know if I kind of
How many screens have you got there, Yusuf? You like looking over there, looking over there, looking over there. You're covered with screens.
He's like Tom Cruise in Minority Report.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've got two screens, but
I think they're just mirrors. They're just mirrors.
Yeah. But
checking the angles.
Rather than me posting the link, because I'm going to have to open up something else.
I think one very quick point, Yusuf, just to say about Dawkins, is that I don't think he fails to correct people. I think he deliberately guides them, knowing what's happening. It's orchestrated.
Yeah.
And I think that is what makes it inherently dishonest. It's like trickery. It's like tricking somebody into atheism by a very well thought out strategy, because he's admitted that atheism doesn't disprove the existence of a creator, but it works. So I use
evolution, not atheism.
Again, it's just, we've been over this, so I won't repeat myself, but if you want to say something stops, you can. There's so many things that are wrong here. We've gone through it. So it's just a repeat. Otherwise, we keep repeating ourselves when they're repeating themselves, and it just lengthens it unnecessarily.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Evolution. Because it works, I use it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's inherently dishonest. I mean, you're actually tricking people into your position. And as an academic, I mean, that's atrocious, quite frankly.
Yeah, but they've all bought into it, Stops. That's why they think he's tricking it, right? They haven't thought about it. Even if I explained it to them like I would to a child, they're still not going to accept it, right? They've bought into the idea, and because many of the brains are kind of sort of programmed now to, once they get a hold of an idea, to shake that idea loose from them is almost impossible, right? It takes hold and it clamps itself in, and it resists all argument to the contrary. So I mean, but again, you're going to appeal to people who are listening, perhaps, who are a little bit more thoughtful, going, is Richard Dawkins really that, or could it be mistaken? And so I would obviously, and we have given the opposing view to this. So to do it again here would just be time consuming. So go look at our part 2 or part 3 of the previous stream, the video before this, and we go into it word for word and explain it.
Yeah, it is. Definitely.
The thing about this this point, actually, because it went on for a little bit of time, is that it's clear to everyone. Everyone can see the point that Dawkins is using somebody's misunderstanding of science connected to evolution, so atheism connected to evolution, as a way to get religion off them. And he's not correcting their misunderstanding of this connection between evolution and atheism, but instead he's just trying to use that as the tool to get religion away from them, which is a trick. But he didn't seem to get it.
Yeah. And what I find really ironic is that other atheists come on saying, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. I'm thinking, well, Dawkins does it. And so many. But
Dawkins isn't the prophet of all atheists, and atheists disagree with Dawkins. So the fact that you're going after him as if, he's, I very seldom, appeal to Dawkins or think too much about Dawkins. I'm thinking about a lot of the other scientists. So again, maybe he's got mass appeal among the lay atheists, but again, those are presumably not the atheists you're talking about, because if you're going to critique them, then that would potentially be low-hanging fruit, and then I can critique all the lay Muslims, of which there are a lot more. So you're presumably not talking about those people. So if they're speaking to me or Stops, then we aren't taking Dawkins at his word on everything. And if he is mistaken, we'll point it out. We don't think he is in this particular case, and we've given the argument. So there we go.
The atheists I've spoken to say science proves evolution, therefore your God doesn't exist. And you're like, well,
but did you hear what he said? Let's just play that back very quickly. Listen carefully here. See if you pick up what he says.
So atheism connected to evolution as a way to get religion off them.
And then as soon as you go to an atheist and say, you do know that, evolution doesn't disprove God. Yeah, of course, we do know that. We
He's
do.
just trying to use that as the tool to get religion away from them, which is a trick. But he didn't seem to get it.
Yeah. And what I find really ironic is that other atheists come on saying, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. I'm thinking, well, Dawkins does it. And so many atheists I've spoken to say, science proves evolution, therefore your God doesn't exist.
Did you hear it? Your God doesn't exist. That's not the same as a God doesn't exist. So he's given the game away himself. He's admitted that atheists come and say your God. Which God are they referring to? Allah. Is Allah say in the Bible that Adam and Eve, or Adam was created from a blood clot and some clay? Well, that disproves common descent. In that case, they are spot on to say that evolution, if evolution is true, it disproves your God. And you've let the cat out of the bag. That slipped out, but it's out now and we've heard it. And I wanted to highlight that so people can hear it, because now he's saying your God. That's actually what most atheists say. They don't normally say a God. And if they do, they're normally speaking to a particular theist and they're referring to that theist God. And if you point it out to them, do you think evolution disproves a God? And if they know about deist gods or other gods, they're going to say, no, it doesn't. Obviously, if they don't have a creation myth story, then and they can incorporate common descent, then obviously it's not going to disprove them.
And the other thing is, he keeps on
and then
telling
as soon as you go
us...
to an atheist and say, you do know...
Sorry, he keeps on telling us, we're not talking about religion, we're not talking about our God, we're not talking about any of those, and then he constantly does.
Yeah, it's the underlying, they think if they don't mention the word Allah or their particular God or the word Quran, that they aren't speaking about God. Everything's prefaced on that. That's what underlies these beliefs. So, I mean, maybe this... maybe they think they're pulling the wool over the gullible Muslims' eyes, but of course we can see through all of that. You don't have to use a word to infer that that's what you're talking about.
That, evolution doesn't disprove God. Yeah, of course, we do know that. We do know that. And yet your lay atheist, they all believe it. So I think one of the brilliant things that came out of that stream was that 3 of their representatives who came on all admitted that proving evolution doesn't disprove a creator. And I think that was something that needed to be...
And again, that's not what they agree with that. So
No,
that's not your
exactly.
creator. There's a difference between a creator and your creator. Again, we've highlighted this, right? I mean, we're beating a dead horse, but this horse keeps trying to get up even after you've, put it down.
That myth needed busting. And I think that if there was one thing that came out of it, it was that. 100%, alhamdulillah.
There's also the issue of like when obviously at the beginning I felt like you made it quite clear that you weren't talking about every single atheist, and obviously because you shouldn't be generalizing here, and they're quite a free floating quote unquote people, so it's difficult to like pin them on absolutely anything because they vary very much in a lot of the things that they come out with, but this also means they can't say we don't say that, because that's also a generalization. So they can't say we as atheists don't make the claim XYZ, because now you're forcing your position upon everyone who declares.
Well, I can say that atheists generally do not say that it disproves a God. And if they do, they're speaking to somebody, and maybe they're couching their language. And all you have to do to check this and to clarify, to say, what are you speaking? What God? Just any God? My God? Whose God? Right? And then they will clearly say your God. Most atheists will. So I can make a generalization. I'm not saying that every single atheist on the planet does that, but I can make a general statement that they are referring to a particular God and not just a God, or disproves God. That's just a vacuous, nebulous term. So I can make that claim, yes.
Atheists, despite complaining about the fact that the atheists are constantly generalized, blah 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 blah. It's like, well, now you're generalizing atheists yourself by making the claim that we as atheists don't do this, when there is examples of it doing it, and simply pointing out.
Yeah, pointing out one example doesn't. You can't generalize from one example. Whereas I can generalize from a large data set. If I had to poll atheists and ask them, I'm very sure they will agree with what Stops and I say, and not with what you're saying.
That we have an experience when talking to atheists, because they are atheists when people do put these things out. They claim to be, they say they don't, they don't believe in God, blah, 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 and then they make another claim. When we point out the fact that an atheist says this, and we're trying to figure out or discuss how we would respond to that, you're not adding anything to the conversation by simply saying, oh, we don't say that. No, we're not saying every atheist does. We're saying with this guy here, that guy there, they declare themselves to be atheists, and they've put forward this argument, and now we're dealing with it.
Okay, but that's fine. But then, if I don't do that, so are you asking me to condemn other atheists? We can play that game, but that game's going to backfire on you, because then I can ask you, hey, what about these Muslims does X, Y, and Z? And you've got a lot more that you have to condemn than I do if you're going to play that game. So that's a pointless game. Speak to one atheist, what do they believe? Take their belief. And if Hamza is going to generalize like that, then he needs a good data set, or he needs reasons to say that that's what happens. And even if he's going to say it in his experience, I'm going to question whether he, in fact, he understands, because his understanding, in my view, is oftentimes quite limited and misunderstands things. So I'm going to take it that he's likely misunderstanding something, and therefore even his anecdotal claim is likely incorrect due to his misunderstanding.
I'm just going to say that's the nature of this type of stream that Hamza did. What he was doing was, we're just going to answer the claims and questions that commonly occur when talking to an atheist, because that's the thing. When atheists, different atheists have different philosophies, and you see that with famous atheists as well. So yeah, we're going to say stuff. We're going to say, like, for example, the evolution thing. So evolution doesn't, there being evolution doesn't disprove there being a God, right? Some atheists will say that, and some won't. So we're like you guys were just addressing the things you guys come across at the park and through dialogue. And it's just that's how it is, and that's what's the beauty of these live streams. Because some atheists will come on and bring another point, and then we're.
Is it just me, or has Ben's voice suddenly become very husky?
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, it's might be by suggestion.
I think there's something extra in his coffee, guys. I think,
just to mention this comment here. He said, Hamza can't say schooling atheists. He can, because the claim isn't Hamza's schooling every atheist that's ever existed. Like, if you are schooling a number of atheists, you are schooling atheists. You know, it's not,
but
it's not an absolute claim.
No, but the irony is...
Okay, but that's a trivial claim, because anybody could say that. They could pick a few people in a different religion. Atheists could say they're schooling Muslims. Hey, we're not schooling all Muslims. Or Christians can say they're schooling Muslims. Or Christians can say they're schooling Hindus. You can pick a small subset or low-hanging fruit and make that claim. It's a trivial claim. It has no, there's no value to that. It's a totally uninteresting claim.
Is this right? If you watch that particular playlist of schooling atheists, you'll see that I'm not speaking to atheists. Right? I'm speaking to theists and Muslims on how to respond and teach atheists that when they come with that abysmal claim, prove your God, provide evidence for your God, how to respond to it. And there's 10 TikTok videos in that playlist. And it's very simple. It's the belief flex.
That's it?
It's not a claim. He really doesn't know the difference. All I'm saying is I am addressing your claim. I am responding to your claim. I am asking you to substantiate your claim. I am not making a claim by doing that. I'm just saying, listen, can you please provide evidence? And if he can't, well, then I'm free to believe it or not. That's how easy it is. So I'm not making a claim by asking somebody for evidence for their claim. It's silly.
All right, let me quickly respond to this, because this person's spamming it here. Did you know that if gravity was slightly more powerful, the universe would collapse into a ball? If gravity was slightly less powerful, the universe would fly apart and there'd be no stars or planets. Gravity is precisely as strong as it needs to be, and if the ratio of the okay, life wouldn't exist. What are the odds that this would happen? Okay, you have a profound misunderstanding of this in the following sense. You're taking certain presuppositions that gravity is always attractive, and many cosmologists suggest that gravity was repulsive, and if that's the case, then the power of gravity could well have been different. But the other point is, and Sean Carroll and others have pointed this out, people that actually understand this, is that if you adjust one constant and then you adjust another to counterbalance that, there's nothing to say that you couldn't adjust these different constants. The claim that theists most often make is that, hey, if you're only adjusting one specifically, then everything might be out of whack. And that could be the case under certain circumstances, but there's nothing to say that if you adjust one, you couldn't adjust another one to counter that in some way. So again, go and listen to the cosmologists like Sean Carroll and others. They will explain to you why that simplistic understanding isn't in fact the case, or is likely not the case. There you go, I've explained it to you now. You have to make assumptions if you're going to make that, and not all cosmologists. In fact, there's quite a few cosmologists that don't accept that, the underlying assumptions of your claim there. I realize you don't even know that you're making assumptions, but you are. Sean Carroll, Google that and you will get some information on that.
Yeah. So all I'm doing is teaching theists, when an atheist comes with that stupid claim, here's how you respond to it. That's all it is. So the idea, Hamza can't say schooling atheists like you said. Of course I can.
No problem. Well, we can say schooling Muslims. It's not a term that I like using. We can do the same thing, right? To say your arguments are stupid. No problem. And the Christians can do the same, and the Hindus can do the same. Everybody can do it, and it's totally uninteresting. What you've got to show is that you've got good reasons for saying that, and that those arguments against the quote-unquote bad atheist arguments actually stand up to scrutiny. Then you've got something interesting to say.
You can't say to me, atheists don't come up, who identify as atheists, don't say prove your God. Or I'll come up and say God doesn't exist. Or say you believe in a sky daddy. You might as well believe in the tooth fairy. You can't say they don't do that. So if you watch that full playlist, you're a schooled atheist, standard.
Yeah, and it's just as valid if someone was to go and quote unquote school theists. Say like you've got an atheist and he's making videos.
There you go. He's actually making my point, right? It's trivial to say this.
He's approached 5-10 theists who are maybe not that bright, and he schools them. It's not dishonest to say this atheist schooled a number of schooled theists. It's not a total.
Now listen, that's a refutation of what Hamza said, and he's agreeing with exactly what I said. But do you think that they'll realize that? I don't think so.
He's not saying he's schooled every theist out there.
Yeah,
he's saying he's schooled these ones that have put forward these particular arguments, and especially if the arguments that these particular theists are putting out are terrible arguments, and he's pointing out why they're terrible, and he's giving his reasons X, Y, Z. We wouldn't make the claim that the atheist couldn't title his video like that. He can, because it's not an absolute claim. He's not put in the claim that it's all theists. It's a general statement.
Yeah, the title of the video has no impact on the arguments being made.
Yeah,
and the fact that he's worried about the title is like a red herring in itself. So why don't you?
Well, okay, but then you guys should be okay with other people saying schooling Muslims, right? As long as you're okay with that, sure. People can title their video whatever they want. What we're interested in is whether it's an interesting claim, not a trivial one.
Talk about the arguments. Why don't you come on and talk about what was wrong with what was said and what was put forward? Because that's where the meat of the matter is.
Yeah.
You know,
I've not heard anything about that yet, about the what I said on the belief. Alhamdulillah. There's one last thing I want to address from the stream, if you don't mind. And I think Yusuf has got a response to this as well, because I think we might be having a little mini debate, I'm not sure yet, about this idea that nature is a source of objective morality, right? So that T-Jump's position was nature itself is the source of objective morality. So then when I kind of said, well, are you talking about just animal kingdom or human beings as well as part of nature? And he said, no, human beings as part of nature. So nature dictates what's moral, yeah. So for example, when the lion kills the cubs of another male, are you saying that if you marry a woman and she's already got kids, it's moral to kill the kids because you want your kids to be brought up in that?
Okay, so he totally misunderstood again, even in the review here. He totally misunderstood T-Jump's view. Like I say, I don't agree with it necessarily, but he doesn't understand it, and so he's critiquing something that he doesn't understand. T-Jump is not saying that it's okay for parents to go and kill their kids. He's saying there's a law of nature, and by his lights, it's wrong for a lion to kill the cubs of another lion. I wouldn't necessarily take that view, but that's his view. But you've got to understand why he's saying that. And at the moment you don't, and you're suggesting, well, that means that it's okay for, you've got the opposite view, which is that T-Jump must be okay with a woman killing her children. That's the exact opposite thing of what he's saying.
Oh, well, obviously, say no. Say, okay, so what happened to the morality of nature at this point? And then we spoke about, for example, how the eagle lands on if it lands on the rabbit, it lands with its talons holding this rabbit down, and it's trying to get away the rabbit, and then it's plucking away at it, eating through its back.
I've got to say, man, the biggest thing for me was for me that was end time when he believed he's immoral by eating meat, but he still does it.
Yeah.
Okay, but how's that end time? All he's pointing out that he's inconsistent. That's nothing against his argument itself. Somebody can be inconsistent, i.e. recognize that they're not acting perfectly morally, but still have a moral position. It's nothing to critique somebody and say, hey, you being a hypocrite with regards to your own moral system. That's fine. He can acknowledge that. But that doesn't mean that his moral system is wrong necessarily. So that's fine. I mean, so what? What are you critiquing? That he's a hypocrite? Fine. Maybe he acknowledged it. He acknowledged that himself. But that says nothing about his actual moral position and the principle that he's putting forward.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
Sorry, why should we listen to you on moral values or anything then?
I've just explained why. Did you hear that, Ben? I've just explained why.
No, but that wasn't the point.
You believe you shouldn't eat meat, but yet you do it anyway, and you call yourself immoral.
Ben, that's not the point. That's not the point. When I spoke about when he used nature as his objective morality standard, and then I said the eagle does this to the rabbit, and he says, well, that's wrong.
Yeah,
wait a minute, you're telling the objective standard it's wrong. So what? So your objectivity's out the window. No, you're now going to apply your subjective standard onto it.
But just to kind of
it looks like not one of these people understand Tom's position.
Yeah.
I mean, that's strange. I mean, I don't know about you.
No, I think they're deliberately trying to misunderstand it to make a point.
I'm not so sure. I don't think
because they want to
that.
laugh about this. They need to ridicule Tom somehow, and okay, he's making his points, and that's cool. So but I think they have a problem with Tom himself, and now they've found an area where they are able to, respond, which they can't, because in other things that he said, at least what I understood, he was quite consistent, he was quite knowledgeable, and he made sense in what he was saying. And now they found somebody, oh, here we can catch him, now let's laugh about him. I don't know, these are schoolyard bullies.
I mean, I could explain Tom's morality. It's not, like I say, it's not something that I agree with, but at least I understand it. And there are critiques you can bring against it. But you first, like I say, you first got to understand it before you can bring any substantial type of critique against it.
To be fair, Ben, I mean, to be honest, and to be fair here, just because you do things that are immoral doesn't mean that you can't think that what you're doing is immoral. That doesn't defeat his argument. To be fair,
okay, at least Hamza's pointing that out. Not Hamza, sorry, Abbas is pointing that out, which is what I said. It's got nothing to do with the principle. Okay, at least that's something. Yeah, not everything's critical. There you go, Abbas. There's one for you. That's a good point you're making there.
To him, because I don't want to misrepresent him either. But I did find it very unusual, Hamza, because you asked him, is it immoral for the eagle to do that to the rabbit, I believe, and he said yes, it is.
Yes.
So,
so nature's wrong.
You know, the funny thing here is that
no, nature is not wrong.
No, it's just that different animals
gracious.
have a different understanding and different levels of different things, and they have different impact. Just as you look at a telephone differently than a cat will look at a telephone, there are other laws of nature that will be taken differently by different species. It's that easy.
Well, here's my understanding in a nutshell. He's using a law of nature, whatever that is, as his foundation, but he's also saying that based on the what's the word? Imposition of will. The unnecessary imposition of will. That's what he uses. So the rabbit doesn't want to be eaten. So the moment the eagle lands on it, it's imposing its will on the rabbit. And through a law of nature, Tom Jump, including this other, he injects this other point in there, then by that, it's objectively wrong by that standard. Now, you can critique the standard, but at least understand what the standard is saying. So the law of nature remains a law, just like God's law supposedly remains a law. And
exactly.
his mechanism for understanding that is imposition of will. The rabbit does not want its will imposed upon. The moment the eagle lands there, it's imposing, therefore it's wrong. I don't agree with that personally, but that's his view.
Okay, but hang on. No, you need to go one step further, because now you're looking at the wasp that is laying the larvae inside of another insect. Now, that, in my eyes, is cruel. So if you go and you say, why is it necessary for a God to create the food chain? Why is it necessary for a God to create cruelty and suffering in animals? Why is it necessary for a God to find this kind of a solution and at the same time claim it is merciful and good? That doesn't work.
Yeah, okay, but that's an argument, and that's a valid argument against their position. At the moment, they're battling to understand Tom's position. And Tom's position would be that the wasp, it's immoral for the wasp to lay its eggs there because there's an imposition of will against whatever the host is that it's laying its eggs in. That's what he's even gone as far as saying that if a rock rolls down a hill, then the rock is immoral because it imposed a will. I don't know how he gets to the will, but I've heard him say that, right? So that's a bit far-fetched, but that's where he's going with it. But understand the position at least before you critique it.
Yeah.
I think these type of arguments are quite absurd, because if you think that's immoral, then the consequences of that would be that the eagle would starve to death, possibly over many days.
No, you didn't understand his position. He talks about the best possible world, which is that in the best of possible worlds, an eagle would not need to eat meat. An eagle would be constructed such that it would survive entirely without imposing its will on some other creature.
Exactly.
Again,
Exactly.
that's a very debatable
model.
point
Yeah.
but at least understand it. So he still says the eagle is that, but that's not a problem if the eagle was a vegetarian, or in fact if the eagle could live off sunlight, for example. And there's creatures that survive.
Yeah, but then it's still
without
imposing
having
the will on vegetarian food that it's eating. We need energy, okay? So if you have a God that requires life forms, in whatever the definition of life forms is, to take energy, to expel the waste, then we have a system where you need to intake something to somehow extract energy from that.
Yeah, but Tom's view, okay, so he's obviously that's the God position. But Tom's view is that the best of possible worlds would mean that you wouldn't impose your will on plants. You would be able to survive without plants. It's kind of a hypothetical view that I'm not, I suppose is certainly hypothetically possible, but it borders on, I won't say borders on absurd because that would be unfair.
It's utopia.
But I think it's problematic. Let's just put it that way. Certainly to our intuitions more than anything else. But there are other
It's not
arguments
realistic,
against
I
it.
think.
But you can imagine a world where all creatures are able to survive and thrive without imposing their will. There's nothing. I don't see anything about that being irrational. It's a thought experiment. Obviously, it's not something that happens in practice, or not as far as we can tell. But I don't see it as being a contradiction in any sense. But that's what he talks about as a perfect world. So
And
no,
Rob-
the eagle wouldn't starve. So that's an invalid objection against Tom's position. So
Yeah.
you've got to understand it before you can try and bring a valid objection.
And Rob, one thing I'd
Please,
like to point out right here now, because this is, I don't know, people don't really react to this, because I maintain that not automatically do we as a civilization today in the West, in Europe, for example, in the US or wherever, have the correct way of doing everything. I still maintain that the natural people in the form of Indians, in the form of the Africans in the bush or whatever, that they have a more harmonious way of dealing with nature and coexisting with nature. So I'm not saying that the way that we are living today, that we are consuming all these things, is the right way. And this is something that we need to point out again and again, because I see this being brought up a lot of times, that we are imposing our will on everybody. And yeah, yes, I agree, but I also think it's wrong.
Feeling a lot of pain and suffering, and its offsprings would die. So then would that be moral? And this is where the lack of knowledge comes in. I was watching a very
The irony of lack of knowledge. You didn't understand his best of possible world, so you think that's an objection. It isn't at all.
interesting program about Yellowstone. And they reintroduced the wolves in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Did you see that, Hamza? It's
Oh,
amazing.
another level.
Absolutely other level,
It
right?
changed the course of the river.
It changes the course of the river. It altered the land. It altered the forest.
Okay, I've heard of this thing, and there's actually critique to that, and they're not actually sure that the wolves, that the introduction of the wolves in fact did do all of these things. So it's not as clear cut as these guys said, because I also heard of this and had a quick look into it, and there were certainly objections that the wolves, that it was the result of the wolves being introduced in Yellowstone that had all these massive changes on the environment. But I think it's a tangential, trivial point, really.
altered the wildlife, the other, insects and birds and all of these other things came, and they couldn't understand how that all happened just by introducing the wolves. And of course, what happened was, because the deer population were not being culled, they were overgrazing. And as a consequence, the rivers were sort of washing away the land, and the trees wouldn't grow, the bushes wouldn't grow, the birds wouldn't come, the insects. So it absolutely altered everything in that area just by introducing the wolves, you see. And so this is the arrogance of human beings, that they think that, oh, that's immoral, but they don't understand the wider context.
Yeah.
Of all the different things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created.
Okay, so is this guy, I wonder if he's an old earth creationist. Does he believe in dinosaurs? Did Allah create those? Was it cruel that Allah allowed an asteroid to wipe out the dinosaurs? All you're looking at today's things, and you're looking at what you think is perfect. How do you decide what is harmonious? Nature has changed vastly over the last millions of years, assuming you actually are believing in science and so forth. So at what point is everything in perfect harmony? Tell me that. And how do you establish that? Because you're here today, you observe around you what you think is harmony. Tomorrow, insects and creatures will adapt. After it wiped out the dinosaurs, it took millions of years for animals to repopulate. Was it perfect before that? Was it perfect after that? Is it perfect now? How do you establish that? It's entirely arbitrary. What's your standard? Good luck with that.
This entire web.
Yeah.
That is altered by the arrogant one decision of taking something away. It's just bonkers.
Yeah,
to me,
but even the specifics, forget the specifics, it's the idea that nature is a source of objective morality.
Yeah.
Yet when it does something that you think is immoral, you're telling nature you're wrong.
Yeah.
So, and I'm trying to work out now, how can something be objective morality when a subjective opinion can say it's wrong? I'm struggling with that.
Yes,
I'm
you are
really
struggling.
with that.
Yeah,
We
very
understand that.
interesting.
I think you should
what
got an
you're saying, because
Well, no, I was going to say, so there is an interesting connection between what Ben brought up. So it might not necessarily, quote unquote, like refute his argument, but it definitely highlights an issue that Sabor was mentioning, that this morality is not binding. He can
Totally irrelevant as to whether the system is objective.
say,
Oh,
eating meat's
look at
immoral.
this.
He's like, ow.
What's that?
You should have seen Rob's live stream on your live.
was a load of nonsense. Well, I mean, we get that from Muslims all the time. They're telling us it's nonsense. You're schooled. When you ask them for any specifics about almost anything, even about their Quran, they battle to do that. So let alone anything that, if I said to that Ibrahim guy, what is it that you think was nonsense? Can you provide one thing that you think was nonsense and your reasons for it? And we'll discuss it. Do you think he could? I'm pretty much going to bet my house he can't. But it was nonsense because, hey, it disagreed with him and he probably didn't understand it. Par for the course. I'm used to that, though. I mean, we've been doing this for years. We get that all the time. Yeah.
I'll still eat
The louder
meat
they
anyway.
say
So
it,
what is morality if it's
Sorry?
No, I just said the louder they say it, the better.
Yeah, well, if you repeat yourself multiple times, either you'll believe it or gullible people who are on your side will presumably think it's the case. That's where we've got to increase our critical thinking, which a lot of people don't really operate with.
not binding? If you can like just choose not to bother following it, like who cares?
Same thing with your God. I could choose not to bother to follow it. There's consequences either way, isn't there? So it's a trivial, but it's a red herring. It's got nothing to do with whether something is moral, objective or not.
So that was an interesting point, which does follow from what Ben pointed out. This issue of it being binding. The other problem.
He does make a contradiction to that very same statement. The fact that it couldn't be binding was he said that the morality was an emergent property and it was like gravity.
Yeah.
And gravity you can't resist. You can't go somewhere on the earth where you're not going to have the gravity affecting you. But at the same time, he's saying what you're saying, Yusuf, which is you can choose not to do it.
Yeah, but this is the thing. So gravity, you can oppose it with extra force in a particular way. So like if you want, gravity says you're going to be here on the floor. But if you can introduce certain forces in a particular way, you can leave Earth's floor and start flying about in the sky. And so that would suggest that if he sees morality as the same thing, then you could do a similar thing. All you need is a particular amount of force working in an opposing direction, and then you can overcome it. But then is this to suggest that it's it's not wrong? Because it's not wrong. You're not like doing anything wrong by flying in a plane, by going against those forces with opposing forces. So I would be very interested to hear what he would say in terms of that. Like, so if morality is like a force like gravity, that is to say that this is wrong, like you go down on Earth if there's no plane or anything. Can
you see how confused he is here? He's thinking that
I'm just thinking this is so simple. This is so fucking simple. I can't understand why is he talking so long about it?
Because they're conflating some sort of like the objective morality with your obligation to follow it. Does it force you to do something? No. Does God force you to do anything if he's got objective morality? Supposedly not. You claim he gives us free will. Exactly. So that's why he's confused here, right? He's conflating two different things together and then sort of asking a question like out of a point, from a point of confusion. The two are completely separate from each other.
So that opposing force overcome it. And then there was a whole issue of Hamza kind of alluded to it at the beginning, not too long ago, about this idea of objective versus subjective morality and things like that. Now, I differed with the brothers insofar as I would say what he was describing you could still call it objective.
You see, okay, there I acknowledge him for that, right? You can call it objective because all objective means, if you're going to accept that, is mind independent. And if it's mind independent, then Sabur's objection is completely irrelevant and has no force to it. So at least he's being charitable with that part of it.
And the reason is like you kind of equate this idea. I think I can't remember who it was that said it exactly. But someone says objective reality. When brother talks about objective, they seem to mean unchanging.
Yes, that's the point, right? Don't conflate unchanging with objective. They're not the same thing. One is mind independent. The other is something does not change. So at least he's highlighting that. I actually thought about that myself before as well, and on the stream at the time, and I never got to chat to these guys about this. This is much more of an interesting topic than the other 2 points, because I think they're trivial, really.
They're saying like if X is immoral, it must always be immoral. But this is talking about morality in an absolutist sense, not necessarily objective. So what he's talking about, just because it includes change, it doesn't mean that it's subjective.
Good. I wonder if that will land with any of these other guys. Yes. I wonder if these other guys will understand what he's saying there. He's correct about this, by the way.
Because it's situation dependent.
Correct. It's mind independent is what objective is. And so if something outside of the mind changes, then something can still be objective even if there's change. That's the conflation. Yeah. But I'm just not sure that any of the other guys will understand this.
When he was talking about it, he was making the claim that it was an emergent property. But that emergent property isn't based in a subject. That emergent property is something external to a mind, and according to their worldview, and it is occurring in nature. So it wouldn't make sense to refer to it as a subjective morality, because it doesn't.
Did he say that there was a concept?
He's correct there. So good one. Yeah, we can also, if we're critiquing, we can also point out when somebody says something
Somebody's right.
that we are correct.
Somebody makes something that is sense.
Yeah. So
that
so
makes
he's
sense,
he's correct there. Now let's just see what their response is to this.
Consequence of not following that morality. Did he say anything about that?
He did mention at one point that nature isn't changing. I can't remember the exact context, but he kind of talked about the fact that we root our morality.
He said certain things in nature don't change, like the laws of physics.
Okay,
or whatever
but
the
not
case is.
nature. Okay, yeah.
So you can cherry pick things and say certain things change, but you can also highlight things that don't change. And so obviously his
The laws
morality
of physics don't change.
is based on something that doesn't change. And so Boer's objection is, well, what happens if it does change? Is it still objective? And the answer is, as Yusuf has pointed out, is yes, it's still objective if it changes. But that critique can be leveled against you guys as well. Because if God decided to change his mind or create a universe with a different set of quote unquote moral laws, then he could do that. And if you say God can't change, then you're limiting God and you're saying he's not omniscient, that he's forced to create only this universe. That would be absurd.
Yeah. Rob, just give me 1 second. Because Jan Wallace is asking honest questions. Let me just highlight this because this is a good one. Has anyone ever left their religion because of your reputations? Yeah. He's on the channel. He's on the panel with us on the Gin and Tonic show. Just ask him why and who did this to him. This was me. And he doesn't get tired of pointing this out. There's a lot of people who are writing emails. There's a lot of people who are saying, thank you so much for opening my eyes. Thank you so much for showing me that I am following a fallacy. Thank you. And so, yes, absolutely. There are many, many, many who do who say thank you and who openly acknowledge that we helped them. Yes.
Yeah, I've had one guy that I spoke to like quietly. I never expect him to do anything, and he was very much, under Hamza's wing to some degree. And I spoke to him for probably about 6 months on and off, and he lives in another country I won't mention necessarily, and he deconverted, right? After a lot of conversations, he brought these arguments, and I said to him, look, go and investigate this for yourself. He said, well, Hamza was saying, don't speak to you, Rob, because you're gonna try and convince me or poison my mind. I said, look, and that should tell you a lot, right? I'm saying to you, go speak to Hamza, go speak to everybody, then think about it and make up your mind. Come and ask me questions, I'll give you my response. You go and listen to Hamza, have his response. You go away and engage your critical thinking. That's my biggest thing. If I could help people engage critical thinking, I think most people would leave religion. That's my personal view. I think their critical thinking is not engaged at a high enough level, and I could pinpoint where that is depending on the individual. And with this gentleman that I spoke to, at least, we got there eventually. Well, I say we got there. It wasn't actually. I didn't start out with my intention of doing that. He knew me from Speaker's Corner, and he just wanted to chat to me, and so we started chatting, every now and again.
Excellent.
And it took about 6 months. But again, I wasn't wedded to the idea he's going to change. I just had a conversation with him, and that was it.
We think that morality is objective and unchanging and is grounded in nature, a necessary nature, just like you believe it's grounded in a necessary God. So it's unchanging because it's a part of the necessary nature that can't change. But then if it's an emergent property, he is admitting that under certain conditions, certain moral propositions would necessarily have to change.
But he's also saying it's wrong.
Sorry, Rob, I don't understand what he's saying. The laws of nature don't change, but nature itself changes. So the same way as we had an environment like 20,000 years ago, where people still roaming, people were not stationary, did not have the ability to grind like wheat and things like that. This only came about later, and it's only then that we started going into crops and animals and things like that. And that made a huge change in nature, because nature changed along with the human beings. So morality has also changed. It's just that today we realize that certain things are, perfect, are not so perfect. We know that certain things are morally unjust or right or wrong. So because we've realized them today, does not mean that the people in those days had the same kind of, realization. but it still doesn't change the fact that, for example, slavery was wrong 20,000 years ago. It's just it wasn't perceived in that way because the situation and the conditions were different. So yeah, it changes with nature, and certain aspects of nature change.
Yeah, well, that's what was confusing me a bit. So he was talking as if when you're making a moral claim, it's absolutely the case, no matter what, throughout the entirety of natural history, and that nature doesn't change.
No. What he's saying is that if nature does not change, i.e., the laws of physics or whatever his system is, as long as nature doesn't change, then he can hold to that same thing. If it was suddenly the case that the laws of physics change, and when you hit somebody, in fact, it was a greeting, and it was a sense of like well-being, and in fact, kissing somebody was like hitting them. If the laws of physics changed, then of course those actions would change in line with that. But as long as nature stays the same in whatever way, the laws of physics, then it would stay the same. And to the degree that it changes, it's still outside of a mind. It's mind independent. So we are now appealing to something outside of the mind. That's all objective means. So whether it changes or not is not the same as whether it's objective. And you actually pointed that out yourself, Yusuf.
Change, but nature does change. And not only that, even if he's trying to talk in some like very vague sense, like you can't even make the claim that because we haven't experienced something changing over the past however long we've been on Earth, which is like, a fragment of the time compared to the entirety of the history of the universe, you can't make a claim that whatever we've noticed in that time to not have changed, that's necessarily absolute. Because
but he's not making that claim. It's
when
he says it's unchanging, what he's saying is that that's our experience of it, and it's very likely to be the case. He's not saying that it's impossible that something could have changed, but that's irrelevant in the past or the future. We're talking about how, certainly in Tom's model anyway, how nature is now, or how it's perceived to have been in the existence of humanity. And to whatever degree he's appealing to things that don't change. But as we said, and as you agreed, even if they did change, they would change in line with nature, which is independent of a human mind. And his yardstick is imposition of the unnecessary imposition of will. And that is unchanging. He will never change, at least as far as I can tell, his yardstick, which is the unnecessary imposition of will. I'm not going to change my yardstick, which is the well-being of conscious creatures. That's never going to change. How I define well-being could change, but this is the confusion. That's why it's very difficult to talk about objective and subjective with many people, because they don't understand the terms, and they think that if something changed, it's just not objective. But Yusuf himself agreed that that's not the case.
You're working here from inference. You're making the assumption that because things have been the way they have been, that they will always be that way, or that they always have been that way. But that's not necessarily the case at all. Like, you can't make that jump. You can't make that.
Yes, you can infer that. You can certainly infer that. There's nothing irrational or illogical. In fact, it's entirely reasonable. And every human does it every single day. Every single day of their life, we all infer that yesterday is going to be very similar to today. The sun's going to rise, gravity is going to stay the same, the laws of nature are not going to change, etc. So it's entirely reasonable. Nobody's claiming that it's impossible or that it has never happened in the history of reality. But we can infer it, at least in our lives and as far as we can tell, the history of humanity, certain things at least.
That necessary absolute claim about the laws that we're putting forward. That they may vary over very long periods of time, but we can't recognize that without that observation.
Yusuf, am I right that you sorry, wait a minute, Yusuf, am I right to say that you quoted exactly what you said on the video? Your note?
So what he said, I writ down, and I kept pausing and rewinding. So when he said, we think that morality is objective and unchanging and is grounded in nature, a necessary nature, just like you believing it's grounded in a necessary God. So it's unchanging because it's a part of the necessary nature that can't change. That is verbatim. So I can.
But that whole statement self-contradictory, because nature, not only is it not changing, nature is change.
Okay, but he's pointing out things that he thinks is unchanging. Yeah, but he's pointing out the things that he does. So okay, if Tom is hanging his hat on unchanging, okay, that's fine. Then he has to defend unchanging. But I think Yusuf pointed out, I think Tom said at some point, it's mind independent. So maybe Tom was talking about something else. Maybe he contradicted himself. Who knows there? But if it's mind independent, then it doesn't matter whether it's changing or unchanging. And what it sounds like is he's appealing to the law and saying it's unchanging, or at least it appears to be unchanging. That's probably the more accurate way of saying it.
Yeah,
that's all it does, and that's the whole point. This is where we get from the inflation to the diversity of life that we have now, it's in a constant state of flux. So I don't
I
understand
don't know what the state of flux means. I think that's just like a vacuous term.
this idea about it's a necessary nature, because we know it's not necessary because it's everything is contingent upon something prior to it. In whatever sense you want to use the word
necessary. That was a good one.
prior. So the fact that there's a possibility that I could not have existed, there's a possibility, right? That means I'm not necessary. There's a possibility that gravity was different or worked in a different way.
No, not in this. It doesn't seem like that in this universe. If you want to postulate another, what's called possible worlds, another possible world, sure. But what's to suggest that it was different? The only thing where that might have been the case is at the very early stages of the Big Bang. That's the only place where we can reasonably infer or possibly infer that, for example, gravity might have been repulsive instead of attractive. But everywhere else, in every single test, it's reliably attractive. So
That becomes automatically not necessary. Right down to the very fundamentals, they don't have to be the way they are, because they're contingent upon something else. And so they automatically then they become changing and unnecessary.
No, that's a confusion. They would have to, in fact, be different. All you're saying is that, hey, if there was another universe and it was different, it would be different. Well, that's a trivial point. That's nothing to say. Here's the universe, here is how it is. And if you're saying, oh, well, if the universe was different, then things would be different. Yes, that's a trivially true point. That's not an argument against Tom Jump's position. And that's why he put forward something these guys, at least most of them, don't understand, apart from Yusuf at one point, with the objective side. That's why they think that they're leveling, a critique which in fact is invalid against his position, because they don't really understand it.
Or not necessary. Unnecessary is probably the wrong term. So I don't get this idea that doesn't change. The other thing is that if there is a property, like he said, it was gravity, and it can be overcome, different creatures use different mechanisms to overcome gravity to a different extent. So all of their moralities, if we were all have individual ways of trying to battle this inherent emergent property of morality that comes from nature, then we'd all be at different levels of morality. And whatever we do, it would differ between us. But we would have to say that all of these different moralities would be equally valid.
Yeah, if it's going to be objective.
If it's going to be objective, because whatever nature gives you, and despite your ability to overcome it, it's still going to be objective, whatever that means.
But also under that paradigm, if somebody were to rob a bank, let's say, and they got away with it, he might say, well, no, that's immoral because of X, Y, Z. But
X, Y, Z. I mean, that helps a lot, Abbas. If you don't know why he said it, and you're saying X, Y, Z, well, then you're miles off the mark. You've got to know why he says it. Then you can critique it. But X, Y, Z doesn't get you anywhere. That tells me that you weren't paying attention.
that person might say, well, I've just made like £1 million and I'm sitting in the Bahamas, and I don't care what you think. So I'm overriding that sense of morality that you have. What are the consequences for that individual, unless, of course, there is something else that person is going to be held to account?
You see, they've got the paradigm that you've got to be held to account. And if you're not held to account by other human beings, you've got to be held to account by God. And as long as they've got this paradigm of there must be cosmic justice, any other worldview, it's just going to seem almost unintelligible to these guys, because they're coming from this paradigm. They're not able to open up their mind and just see whether it's consistent. They could disagree with it and say maybe it's not sound, and that's a valid critique probably. But if they come from this mindset, well, anything else is almost going to be unintelligible, and they're going to battle to even understand it.
Why? Do you see my point? There doesn't seem to be even if you argue that, okay, nature is inherently, and even if you argue, for example, that morality within nature at that point is absolute, and as nature changes, that becomes the new paradigm, the new absolute, let's say, for argument's sake. But what's the consequence of somebody breaking those laws and just killing somebody or stealing from somebody? In that situation, that person can have a nice life on a yacht in the Bahamas or whatever, live a ripe old age of 80, 90 or 100, and then die. And then apparently under that situation, there doesn't seem to be any consequences for that individual.
And all we have to ask Abbas is, why do you think Tom would say that it's wrong? And he would not know how to respond. And that would tell you everything you needed to know here. So Abbas, presumably Tom would say that's wrong. Would you agree? Yeah. Why do you think Tom says it's wrong? And he will probably babble or say, well, I don't know, X, Y, and Z is probably his answer, right? Because that's what he said before. That tells you that he just doesn't understand it.
Yeah, it kind of reduces.
You need consequences to have the morality in the first place.
Well, I think that without consequences, you would find that very few people, or certainly quite a large number of people, would not be moral. I mean, there was if you remember, there was a blackout in New York City And I think it went on for a day or a few hours or certainly whatever. And what they found was that the average person was looting supermarkets and stealing bread and stealing. And yet the middle and upper class people were pulling outside jewelers in Mercedes.
Yeah, you're right.
And they were smashing the windows and they were stealing the jewelry on the basis that they knew they could get away with it because there was mass hysteria, mass mob mentality. And they knew under that umbrella of chaos, they could get away with things. And so what you will actually find is that unless those consequences are there, either man-made consequences, the law, the strong hand of the law, or there's something higher, many people will quite easily sort of negate that morality for a few days or a few weeks or a few hours just so they can benefit,
Sorry, you were saying something?
No, I was saying that's nonsense. That's nonsense. I mean, you have the... I mean, come on.
Absolutely correct with this comment. But I think Abbas is of this.
Exactly. You have people. I mean, you have the death sentence for certain crimes, and people still commit them. So, the consequences are not really what drives or
Consequences
prevents or
might affect some people. It certainly won't affect everybody. And that again says nothing about whether the system is in fact valid and sound, i.e. that the objective moral system that Tom is putting forward is valid and sound. Whether people will follow it is irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think this whole argument is a bit silly. But listen, Rob, I've had enough for today.
Okay.
I realize that sometimes I'm not following, and then I'm missing a whole minute because I'm not able to focus anymore.
No, absolutely.
So
fine.
I'm going to drop out.
No, I'm going to stop then as well. We can always do it again at some other point. We can continue. But I want to thank you so much for joining, as always. That's been a pleasure. It's always better to do it with two of us than one. You'll see something that I won't, etc. So that's all good. So again, remember everybody that we are back tomorrow at 8 p.m. UK time for the Gin and Tonic show. So don't miss that if you're interested in that. And we'll have our other co-host as well, Thunderous. He's a Christian, but we are all united in critiquing Islam because that's what the show is about. Obviously, these shows critique atheists, and they're welcome to do that. We have a show that does that. And again, if you know any Muslims that are brave enough to come on and defend Islam, we'd love to have them on, and we'll give them the time to do that defense. On that note, thank you so much, Stops. Thank you to everybody who's been viewing, and I'm sure we'll be back with part 2.
And we'll see you next time.
And good night to you until part 2, whenever that may be.
Good night.